center field. It is over to Torres. Mitchell will have at least a double, and he will stop right there. The no-hitter is gone.
Right back up the middle, he does just that. Mitchell scores. Freely to third. We are even one apiece. Ground ball up the middle. Wynn has it. Bubbles! Everybody's safe. And the Brewers have the lead.
The two coming. Got him! The Brewers sweep the Cardinals. First home sweep since 2011 against St. Louis. They were no hit for the first 7 innings.
Well, that's what it sounded like yesterday as the game, God, that game was the tale of two games. It was so much fun. We're watching it in here. We think bacon-wrapped wiener can predict the future with 10 strikeouts for May. He's got the no-hitter going. I'm driving home listening to it. And then I get to the grocery store and I walk in, and then Ish hits the fan. And that game went from exciting and feeling like, okay, you made yourself feel a little bit better about this road trip before you come back home to take on the Cubs. And then just a swift kick to the gonads as things unravel for Dustin May and the Cardinals lose 2-1. Alongside Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. Welcome into BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN as the Cardinals swept out of Milwaukee, 2-1 final score. So on that series against the Milwaukee Brewers, you score 1 run yesterday, 0 runs the day prior, and 1 run in the first game when they took on Jacob Misiorowski.
To be fair to that, 1 run against Misiorowski was kind of a win.
Very impressive, to say the least, but not a good series overall. And T-Bone, honestly, that game just left an icky feeling for you. Not so much on the offensive side, and, kudos to Dustin May because that was a hell of a outing for him and something that they really needed. It paid tribute to the talk of him being a stopper for the Cardinals. But, man, you see how that game unraveled for the Cardinals. You had that misplay in left field by Torres, which I don't know how you felt, T-Bone. I think Nathan Church makes that play. It was just a really weird route that Torres took to it. You then have, in what I thought was just a misplay by both Gorman and May, probably more May than Gorman, but on that bunt play that got the runner from second to third, and then the runner was safe at first. That should have been an out at first base. I was listening to the Brewers side of the broadcast again, and they were like, what is May doing? The bunt went down. He took 2 steps towards it and then just kind of looked up in the air frustrated because the game got away from him, which I can understand when you got a no-hitter at that point, but that left the inning alive. And then, of course, you had the next thing that happened where Mason Wynn doesn't make the play at shortstop. So a rare game where defense is the blunder for them. The pitching just doesn't hold up and your offense doesn't come through. Just a real icky way for that series to end for the Cardinals.
Yeah, it's the worst loss of the season. And I don't mean that by like they didn't play well. It was literally 1 inning where it just snowballed on them. Right, and I was curious to see how May would react to giving up that first hit, right? We see a lot of guys have that letdown, and he stays out there. And then, like you said, I'm not sure whether it was him or Gorman that doesn't hold up their responsibility. I think it was May because Gorman kind of stayed put at third.
Which makes sense because you're trying to get the runner.
Exactly, so you at least have a chance to maybe throw out that lead runner. And then it just all hell broke loose, right? And it's not even like JoJo pitched bad either, right? No. May wasn't bad. JoJo wasn't bad. You out-hit them 8-3. Like, that's a ball game that the percentage would tell you, okay, we're going to come away with this. But instead, you end up getting swept by the Milwaukee Brewers, who are your freaking kryptonite. And It feels like every time you go to Milwaukee, it's a fight through, just a dogfight the entire time. And the Brewers have solidified themselves as the best team in the division, right? I mean, we talked about it before the Cardinals started that set against the Pittsburgh Pirates. You take a look at what they've done so far. They dropped 2-3 to Pittsburgh. They had a split in a 2-game set with the Reds, and then they get swept by Milwaukee. They're guaranteed to go below 500 in this 12-game or 11-game stretch now because of a rainout, but they're guaranteed to go below 500 in this stretch against the NL Central teams. And that's why that loss really stings yesterday, because that one you had every chance to win. You had every chance, really, in 2 of the 3 games. I get it. Misiorowski was tough, but you hung around there. At least that one was still in striking distance, but the offense has just gone extremely cold for the St. Louis Cardinals, and I know we'll talk more about that later on today, but the offense isn't getting going. The pitching's doing its part, But, man, offensively, they have had no answer so far in this stretch, and that's because you look at the NL Central, and there's some really good freaking pitching in this division, starting with the Milwaukee Brewers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where you stand on it, T-Bone, but this stretch, and barring what happens in the Cubs series, because I do think that can raise your hope a little bit more, but this does start to feel a little like what June felt like last year. We were talking about this in the office. The numbers offensively are kind of similar to where they were in June. It's just June last year when I think they went 8-16, if I'm not mistaken, and that's where it really came into. It's like, oh, okay, I don't think this is going to last this season, was your pitching fell apart. Now, I don't think your pitching's falling apart. You're going to get regression from Michael McGreevy. Dustin May has been awesome for you. And then Matthew Liberatore, despite the runs going up on him, he's still striking guys out. But if regression happens for that pitching and your offense takes a deeper step back than what they did in June, that's where you start to get really worried. And this was the stretch that it felt like you were able to gain a little bit of wiggle room and distance from you and the Pirates and you and the Reds. And an ending like that, to where you just couldn't score runs against Milwaukee's elite pitching, but in a game that it felt like you probably needed to have, for it to end and it to end defensively against you, that's the part that you really start to be like, oh boy, I hope things don't start to regress all around for the Cardinals.
Yeah, and I don't know that they're going to go through kind of the June swoon that they had last year, because at least with the offense, there's some reinforcement coming. Now, it's only one guy, but it is Lars Nootbaar is going to be back by the time we get into June, which is definitely going to help. We talked about it a lot yesterday. It's going to help lengthen out this lineup to where hopefully you've got 5 guys that are about 20% above league average, as long as Nootbaar gets back to what he was years prior before he started to deal with these injuries to his heels. So at least I feel better about that. And I'm kind of with you on the pitching side. Yeah, McGreevy's going to regress, as we talked about. For the most part, like, everybody else is kind of pitching to what I expect, if not like with May's numbers. May's numbers are going to get better. If you take out his first 2 starts, I think he's at like a 3 ERA so far on the year. So I think they're in a good spot still. I think they just happen to run into a buzzsaw pitching here in this stretch to where it's really kind of pulled that offense back down. And when you go up against good pitching, the top 4 in your lineup have to really be the ones that take that step forward. And Weatherholt's just going through it right now, right? He's going kind of through his rookie struggles at the plate in that leadoff spot. So now you're down to like 3 guys that you trust. And when you only have 3 guys that you trust, it's going to be hard to put some runs up on the board, as we've seen.
Well, and the guy that you feel for that's really going through it is Mason Wynn. I mean, just a uncommon error for him yesterday with that blunder at shortstop. He's got 5 errors already this season, which is just a weird thing to say for Mason Wynn. But on top of that, the bat has just gone completely silent. I know he got a hit yesterday, but struck out as well, goes 1 for 4. That's a guy that you really need to find his way out of this slump. And I don't know if that's moving him around in the lineup. I don't know if it's giving him an extra day. You don't really have any other options to fill into that spot. But Mason Wynn is the one that I think a lot of people will look at and be like, man, what's happening here? Because on top of the bat going quiet, now you're starting to see the errors pile up a little bit more for Mason Wynn.
Yeah, I don't think he's been as good defensively at shortstop this year. But like that play yesterday is a tough one up the middle, moving to your left. He made a hell of a play in the, I think it was 5th inning, if I remember correctly, where he slides to his left, fires a missile to first that barely picks. That is one of those to where, okay, we're not talking about it if it doesn't happen in a 2-1 loss in a game where you had a no-hitter through 7, right? Odds are we don't even bring it up. But again, it's some of the little things that are starting to kind of compile up on the Cardinals in this little stretch here in May where they're going through their first, I would say, significant struggles on the season. Again, they did everything well except for 1 inning, right? 3 plays, and then the next thing you know, you're down 2-1, and you end up losing that game. So, yeah, it's a tough one for Mason Wynn, but that's one of those plays that if the Cardinals live on such small margins that they're going to have to make in this season. Otherwise, it's going to end up with a lot of 1-run losses like we saw yesterday. It's
what Derek told us. Like, if you're not going to be slugging at a high pitch, right, if you're not going to be getting the swing and miss stuff, which they are getting swing and miss, at least from the last 3 guys, but you have to rely on your defense to be perfect. And I think in that game where Dustin May felt that no-hitter, that it was so close for him, as soon as that ball was not caught by Torres, that inning went and unraveled pretty quickly, and the Cardinals will try and right the ship once they take on the Cubs starting tomorrow with the weekend series. We got this text on our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646 from the 636. I think there's too much focus on the negatives right now. We knew that the Cardinals would not be a World Series contender. We have a primarily very young team that aren't going to mash against elite pitching. Give them a couple of years, and these guys are going to be seriously good and playing deep baseball in October. I like the optimism there, 636. But I think and by no means are we like sitting here acting as if all the rebuild has been blown up. No, they're doing what they're supposed to do. The issue is that the Milwaukee Brewers have just had the Cardinals number. And it's the team that is always going to be the kryptonite. Now, that won't last forever. They will have their moments, but T-Bone did this research yesterday against NL Central opponents since 2018. Cardinals are 65-60 against the Cubs, so 5 games above 500. They're 17 games above 500 against the Reds. They're 26 games above 500 against the Pirates, and they're 7 games below 500 against the Milwaukee Brewers, 61-68. This is just the team that just beats the Cardinals down. And every time it feels like they're building up some momentum, Milwaukee Brewers show up and kind of knock it down a peg. I saw Dontrell Willis talking about this on the Fox broadcast a day ago or 2 days ago. Like the Chicago Cubs in the back of their heads, it's the Milwaukee Brewers and what they just did to them. Milwaukee is just that big brother right now that, as exciting as the future is for the Cardinals, and it is very exciting, the Milwaukee Brewers are just that team that kind of kicks you back into reality like you just saw.
Yeah, they've become the engine of the NL Central, right? I mean, they're the team that just no one can seem to kind of figure out. Everybody in the Central was going through a stretch here against the NL Central opponents, and Milwaukee's the one that came out on top again, right? I mean, they're up 4.5 games now on both sides. And to the texter's point, yeah, I understand it sounds like we're coming off negative. We've talked a lot about the positives, like J.J. Weatherholt looks really good so far this season. Jordan Walker's become a superstar for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's going to be, if he continues this, be in the MVP conversation this year. Herrera and Burley are doing their thing. The problem is if you look at the last 9 games, pick out the positive for him, right? It would be the pitching side. We've made reference. Dustin May was pretty good yesterday. Yeah. Jojo Romero was solid for them in yesterday's outing.
Previous 2 games, it was Michael McGreevy who was decent for them. Matthew Liberatore was really good for them with the swing and miss.
The problem, though, is on the pitching side, I don't know how much of those guys are like long-term answers in the rotation or in the bullpen, right? It's the offense that are the long-term pieces that we're talking about that we're trying to figure out, okay, who fits into this as they build moving forward. And right now, you're not going to get this answer for 9 games, but through the last 9 games, they're just not doing anything offensively. And some of the pieces that we've talked about, like Mason Wynn, going to have to pick it up for the St. Louis Cardinals. Victor Scott's potentially going to lose his job if he doesn't start hitting here soon because they're getting ready to have a bit of an outfield crunch. Like, there's just not a lot of positives to put your hat on over the last 9 games. That doesn't mean things have been a complete failure because they're exceeding expectations. I still think they might be a playoff team this year. I look across the National League, and I've watched a lot of the teams across the board, and I say, man, the Cardinals feel like a team that is better than some of these others that we've seen. The problem is just right now things are starting to snowball on them a little bit. And I think they'll be fine, right? That Cubs series will be a good tell. I think we talked about this last week. It feels like every time the Cardinals kind of get kicked down, they somehow find a way to get right back up. They got swept by the Seattle Mariners at home. Then they went to Pittsburgh and swept the Pirates for 4 games. You know, they just got swept by Milwaukee. We'll see how they respond against the Chicago Cubs. They get a day off. I think they're going to be fine.
Well, to your point about them being still a playoff team, you believe. They're taking on the Cubs, and the Cubs are sitting right behind them in the wild card spot. So, like, you didn't get to play the full series against the Cincinnati Reds because rain dictated that.
I think the Reds stink.
I do, too. So you're probably going to beat them in 2 of 3. So it's you, it's the Cubs, it's the Reds, and you got to worry about the Phillies now because the Phillies are starting to play a little bit better. But then you got the Padres. Like, this is by no means us saying that the Cardinals now have completely ished the bed and the season's over. No, that's not where this at. It's just a tough way for that series to end in a game that you hope that the Cardinals were able to get back on track. But you're right. That's the one thing that they've done so well this season, as after a bad series or a bad game, they seem to respond really well, and they'll get that opportunity on Friday when they welcome in the Chicago Cubs, who continue their struggles, as they did pick up a win yesterday, though, T-Bone. So maybe they're in a little bit of a good vibes coming into Busch Stadium. Coming up at 15 minutes, Logan Stankoven was awesome once again for the Carolina Hurricanes last night. Is it possible for the Blues to find their Logan Stankoven? We'll explain in 15 minutes. But coming up next, Dustin May, near no-hitter yesterday. Is it possible for him to pitch his way into the Cardinals' future plans? We'll discuss that next here on 101 ESPN. Dustin May yesterday, 7 innings of work, had the no-hitter up until that 7th inning, gave up 2 hits, 2 runs that were scored, 1 that was credited to him, but he had 9 strikeouts. In his last 3 starts, he's got 19 strikeouts, and he's given them a total of 18 1/3 innings of work. That's a long way from where he started to where there was a little bit of concern of what Dustin May would look like. And along with Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. If Dustin May continues this, I think the conversations are going to continue. Well, what do the Cardinals decide to do with him? Now, a lot of this is going to revolve around, are they sitting in a playoff spot? Are they going to buy at the deadline? But is Dustin May a part of their future beyond this season if he continues to pitch the way that he's pitching? Because like it or not, He pitched like a stopper yesterday. You needed somebody to come in and give you innings and give you a competitive opportunity against the Brewers for how the first two went, and Dustin May did that. But I think I'm going to be in the minority here, T-Bone, because Dustin May has been pitching well. I don't think anything he can do the rest of this season is going to change my mind, because I think the better he performs and the more healthy he looks to other teams that have a better shot at winning a World Series this year are going to value a guy like Dustin May. There's no commitment beyond this year. There's a mutual option if a team decides to keep him there for $20 million, which is a decent return. And as much as the Cardinals need pitching, I still believe that in the first year of a rebuild, the Cardinals need as many assets as possible. If you want to try and find your Mizorowski or Harrison like the Milwaukee Brewers threw out there yesterday, then trust your prospect evaluators and trust the guys that look at what they can get in return and take that chance at the trade deadline. So he's been awesome. Nine starts, 7 of those have been quality starts this season. But Dustin May, to me, is not a part of the future for the Cardinals. It's what you can get returned for Dustin May that's a part of the future.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do with him, especially if it's kind of like this at the deadline where they're in it, kind of in it. You know, right now they hold the last wild card spot, but there's a huge logjam of teams that are in that wild card. We'll see if there's any separation through the month of June. But man, like, you take out those last 2 starts, and look, those happen. You can't just magically erase them. But since those 2 starts, 9 starts, 7 quality starts, 3.05 ERA, and striking out 7.4 batters per 9 innings. That plays, man. And that's kind of what I expected that the Cardinals were going to get from Dustin May if he was healthy, especially since he had talked about in the offseason how he was able to kind of bulk back up and get back to where he was in his time with the LA Dodgers. I think his future is almost dependent on, I think it's twofold. I think one of them is the offers that you get at the deadline. Does somebody blow you away? I don't know if anybody will, because if you look back at last year's trade deadline, starters weren't really a hot commodity on the market. And Merrill Kelly was a guy that got dealt from the Diamondbacks to the Rangers. Mm-hmm. And I really like Merrill Kelly. I think he's a very good starter. He's like a good number 2 or 3 to put in your rotation for the playoffs. I think same could be said for Dustin May if he continues to pitch like this. And the Diamondbacks really got nothing for him because he was a rental. And that's kind of how teams are going to approach Dustin May, right? They're going to have to approach him as a rental option if you trade for him because of that mutual option. Because if he continues to pitch like this, I wouldn't doubt that he maybe tries to opt out of that deal and see if he can get a longer-term contract in free agency. So I don't know that there's going to be a ton of value for him. I might be wrong on that, but what we see at the deadline now is teams mostly pivot towards relievers, right? Mm-hmm. They pay a higher price for a guy like Riley O'Brien than they will for a Dustin May. Honestly, maybe even a JoJo Romero, right? They may be willing to pay a little bit more for him, even as a rental, just because relievers are so much more important when we get to October. And then I think the other factor that plays into this is, do we start to see guys take that next step down at AAA, mm-hmm. right? Do they really feel like they need to kind of clear a spot on the 40-man / on the active 26-man roster for not just the home stretch of this season, but going into next year, right? Because they could also just keep him, maybe both sides agree on picking up the mutual option and then potentially try and trade him at that point. But I think that's where the conversation comes for him, and it becomes interesting because if you don't see like Matthews continue to take the next step, if you don't see Doyle really continue to develop at AA to get to where he could be at AAA next year, maybe you decide to hang on to him, because I don't know if I'm trading this version of Dustin May so I can clear up a spot for Dobbins, for example, or Bryson Motts just yet. So I think there's still a chance he can pitch his way into the plans moving forward. I'm on your side right now of, yeah, okay, I would probably be listening on him at the deadline, but I don't think that that's a lock in place of this guy's going to be gone by the time we get to, I think, August 2nd is the trade deadline this year.
And I think that's an important factor on this that you make a great point on. Like, it does really come down to what you're getting in return, because if you're just getting a lottery prospect in return that you kind of are 50-50 on, then yeah, it might make more sense to keep a Dustin May for $20 million. I just wonder that for the potential of a work stoppage to where there's no connection with him next year, for a guy that swing and miss stuff continues to rise, if it continues to rise, because a lot of this is just barring the health of Dustin May. I just wonder how much teams look at it and say, hey, now it might be a time to actually try and go after it, and how many starting pitchers are out there on the market. Because Tarek Skubal's going to be the one that every team thinks they have the ability to go get, but do they have the ability to go get? And that's where the Cardinals can leverage it a little bit more. The other factor into this is exactly what you said with the prospects. Like, if your guys aren't developing, then yeah, if you're certain that you're going to have to go out there and sign a guy for 2027, if there's any baseball being played, then maybe does it make more sense to keep the guy for $20 million versus go sign him? I would just lean on, hey, like, I kind of trust this pitching staff now in terms of seeing what a guy has and kind of getting him right. Can you find another Dustin May on the free agent market for less than $20 million that you feel like you can get that upside still on? Because, again, if you can go get another guy on a one-year deal and have him right the ship and turn into a hot commodity around Major League Baseball, that's just the best way to continue to build until your guys are ready to get to that next level.
Yeah, and that's where it just becomes an interesting conversation. And then the other thing is, would you rather have him or would you rather have like a Palante, for example, on the roster? Because they may look at it and say, all right, we can pick up the $20 million option on Dustin May, and maybe Palante carries some more valuable for a team. And I know that sounds crazy, but he's got control. Yep. He'll start to get expensive as he gets into the ARB system. Maybe that's the guy they look at trading more in the offseason, not at the deadline. But that's the guy that they look at and say, okay, let's move on from him. That clears the spot for Dobbins or for Motts, or if Quinn Matthews really takes the next step here, maybe that's more the route of where they go. I just think when you look at Dustin May, and especially if you're in a playoff spot, I think it's what makes it more interesting. He's the kind of guy you want on the mound for you in a playoff start, especially if you're the Cardinals, right? Because of the way he's been pitching here of late. The other thing that I just would be overly cautious about, too, of trying to potentially keep him, quote-unquote, long-term, as BK has brought up as well, is like, would you consider a contract extension with him? Is, okay, he's been healthy this year, which is great, and I hope that continues. He hasn't proven to be healthy long-term, right? When you look at his time in the Dodgers, all it was constantly injury after injury after injury. So that's the other thing to consider when you're talking about the quote-unquote future of Dustin May, is how much do you think he's going to be able to stay healthy? Maybe the Cardinals have found the magic pixie dust that keeps starters healthy at the major league level, right? They didn't put a starter on the IL last year. Knock on wood, they haven't had to do it yet this year. Now, they've dealt with injuries in the minors.
Well, Richard Fitz did.
Yeah, he was technically in Memphis when he got hurt. I'll blame that training staff.
Okay. We'll blame the AAA training staff. That's fine.
That's where all the guys are getting hurt is the minors, not up here.
They need to get their ish together.
Yeah, seriously. Like, they haven't had to put a guy on the IL in a long time.
You're not wrong, though, because they got Sonny Gray through the season. And, like, to get Sonny Gray through the season and not have him injured is a win if you're looking at that.
Look, the Red Sox couldn't do it. He got hurt for him already this year.
That was his second start?
Yeah, hamstring issues.
You got me on that. You got me on that one, T-Bone, because they figured it out. And if that's the case, and you've got a guy that wants to go play there because you feel like you could get back on the right track, you've got a staff that can scout the right player that has the right stuff. And if you know that the staff can keep a guy healthy, then that's not the worst thing in the world. The other thing with the pitching side of this, and we talked a little bit about it in the open there, is the fundamentals of the Cardinals. Defensively, you had a couple of misplays yesterday. Like the bunt was the one that really caught my eye. Like the Mason Wynn one, you're right. That's a hard play. The Torres one, he just took a weird route in left field
Tough
for it.
Play too, also in sun to shade.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you had a long way to go on that one. But the bunt was the one that it was like, what's going on here? Because, like, the Cardinals make it a fundamental, mandatory piece. If you're a Cardinal, you got to understand to play defense the right way. Baseball Savant is at a -1 and outs above average right now in the month of May for the Cardinals. Is that turning in the wrong direction for this St. Louis team?
I feel like it has been a little lackluster. Not like awful. I know what the outs above average numbers say that they've been bad this month. I think some of that's been kind of attributed to where it feels like Wayne hasn't been as crisp and clean defensively over the last couple of games. But I don't think that's anything that's worrisome long term, right? But I do think it has shown us over the last, 9 games or so, 12 games, depending on how far you want to say this dates back to in the month of May. I think it continues to show you just on how razor thin of edge they have, right? And that they cannot have things like this happen to where it is, whether it's they don't take an extra base or they have an error on the infield that ends up costing them, or it's a weird route by Torres that instead of becoming an out and the no-hitter's alive, it's a double and the tying runs in scoring position, that you don't field a bunt well. Like, these are the small things that they just can't have pile up on them because they're not a top 10 offense across baseball, right? They don't have a top 10 pitching staff across the game, so they have to win on all the little margins. And I do feel like here over the last 12 games or so, it hasn't been as crisp and clean. I don't think that's anything to worry about long term. I just think that's one of those weird, everybody has this moment in the baseball season. And I think once you start to see them get back to that is when you're going to start to feel a little bit better about how the Cardinals are playing. And the other thing, too, is, to be honest with you, I don't know how much of that is actually a real thing that I feel, or if it's I'm feeling that because the offense isn't doing a whole lot. So I kind of just then place it on everybody on all the other little things across the game.
That's what I think. I think it's just the offense has been so quiet for you. It's 19 runs in your last 7 games against some teams that you thought they'd be able to hit a little bit better than what they did, mostly Pittsburgh and really Cincinnati, which they did beat up Cincinnati that first game that they played. That's what I think it is, because when one thing that's been going well for you disappears, you start nitpicking in every area. Like, again, the Mason win, that's a tough play. The Brian Torres, that's a tough play. Those happen, but when your offense is coming through and you make it up in the next inning or the next 2 innings, you're not worried about it. But now you have to play perfect baseball. And when you don't, games like yesterday start to be a little bit more of a blemish on the schedule for what the Cardinals have. Tanner Henderickson, Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. In 15, we'll get to questions and answers. You can send them in via our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. You can also do so over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Our studio cam is brought to you by the Air Alliance team. Coming up next, the Carolina Hurricanes picked up the win last night. Logan Stankoven was a guy that they acquired via a Mikko Rantanen trade. Can the Blues do the same thing this offseason? We'll discuss that and a new trade board that's out here on 101 ESPN.
Good morning. My name is Eric Harkey with your Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The NBA playoffs continue tonight as the Thunder try to clinch their spot in the NBA Finals on the road in San Antonio. This Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, a Daikin heating and air conditioning dealer.
What you heard right here on 101 ESPN, the Carolina Hurricanes shut out the Montreal Canadiens 4-0. They're up 3-1 in the series, and I think the excitement of the playoff run by Montreal might be coming to an end because Carolina has figured things out, and they
look like a buzzsaw.
They look like the team that they were. That's why that first game when they got beat 6-2, I was like, this is an anomaly. That's not who Carolina is, and they figured it out. And I do think that was rust for them. And since then, they've beat Montreal twice in overtime and picked up the 4-0 win last night. And last night, Logan Stankoven scored a goal. And for people that might be like, who the hell are you talking about? Logan Stankoven is a former second-round draft pick. He's a tiny little bugger. He's 5'8", 165 pounds, but he was the sole piece that the Carolina Hurricanes got in return when they traded away Mikko Rantanen. We all remember the Rantanen from Colorado to Carolina, and then it didn't work in Carolina, so they traded him to Dallas. Logan Stankoven last season in 19 games for Carolina had 9 points, and in the playoffs he scored 5 goals and 8 points. This season, he scored 21 goals, had 44 points, was a plus 12, and has 8 goals in this postseason run right now for Carolina. And T-Bone, you put this in the notes last night, and I'm actually ashamed of myself that I didn't think of this. How do the Blues find their Logan Stankoven? Because along with Stankoven, it was 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks that the Carolina Hurricanes received for Mikko Rantanen. Now, let's just put Kyrou in the position of Rantanen because he's the one that NHL seems to be talking a lot about. You're not getting that type of return for a Jordan Kyrou. He's not Mikko Rantanen. But what the Blues are looking for is what Logan Stankoven is. He's a young centerman that you feel like has a piece of the future, and Carolina now has him as their second-line center. That, to me, would be a goal for the Blues of fixing your problems by where you've got a lot of strengths. You've got a lot of wingers. You need help at the center position. And the question becomes, can you find your Logan Stankoven on this trade market? And it seems like there might be a lot of guys that fall into this criteria for St. Louis this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of guys, based on reporting, that are going to be available that can kind of fit that center position. And we'll talk about this on a Tinder Thursday, but you've got McTavish with Anaheim. You know, you've got Shane Wright, who we've talked about, that's in Seattle. When I was starting to read up more about like Stankoven, and there was a good piece on the Daily Faceoff about how the Hurricanes ended up taking a bad situation and making it good when they acquired Rantanen and then had to move on from him like 10 games later. And when Stankoven was that piece, I said, okay, Kyrou's not Rantanen, so you're not getting that full package in return where it was 2 firsts, 2 thirds, on top of, I think Taylor Hall was a part of it as in a 3-team deal. But can you use Kyrou to just go get the center and then maybe even attach an asset to him, right? Kind of just do your version of this trade where you trade a winger that, for whatever reason, it just didn't work for him here in St. Louis this year, and go out there and acquire the guy that can become your number 2 center. I think they might be able to, right? Especially based on all the reports that this is going to be an active trade market this offseason. I think that's kind of what they're looking for, is they're looking to maybe move Kyrou and see if they can find that second-line center, especially if they can't trade up to go up and get, why am I drawing a blank on the center's name in the draft that we've talked about? Malhotra.
Or Vizho Bork, honestly, either one of those.
If you can't get either of those guys, can you move Kyrou and an asset to try and go out and get your center? I think he has that kind of value across the league that you could make it work. So when I saw that and was reading up on that, I was like, man, this just screams kind of the move that the Blues are going to try and pull off this offseason if they can.
Stankoven's first season with Dallas. Now, it was a really good one, but because he was playing in the American Hockey League, but he had 14 points in 24 games. The next season, his first full season as an NHL player, he had 9 goals and 29 points in 59 games, and he was averaging about 15 minutes a night. Is it crazy to sit here and say that Dalibor Dvorsky could do that for you next year?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that's the hope that he becomes that.
Because he scored 12 goals for you last season, averaging about 14 minutes and 20 seconds a night, playing 71 games for you.
I don't know if he's going to end up being there next year, but can he get there and, like, 2 years, 3 years. I think it's in the range of outcomes. Would I bet on it today? Probably
2 years
not.
would put him at the same age, too, because Stankoven's 22 right now, and Dvorsky will be 21 next season.
I definitely think there's a chance, but I think it's not the end of the world. Or because I saw someone bring this up on the text line as well, as you have that guy in Dvorsky. I would almost want another out possibly as well, right? If I could move Kyrou and get McTavish, if you believe in Shane Wright, trade for Shane Wright.
Yeah.
And then I've got two guys that can possibly do it. And if I hit on both of them, Yahtzee, right? Like now I've got that depth up the middle that you've talked so much about how the best teams in the NHL have that. It's what the Blues did in the 19 Cup run. And you know what? Worst case scenario, maybe I hit on one of them and I have a second line center and the other guy becomes the third line center. So, yeah, I think Dvorsky can get there. I think it's probably a little much to ask of him to be there by next year. But when he starts to develop, I think your hope is that he can become that.
And the other guy that I would bring up here, guys, this is what Shane Wright could be. And I know people don't like to say this, and I'm skeptical of it, but Shane Wright last season, not this past one, but the year prior, averaging about 14 minutes a night, 19 goals, 44 points, and was a +4 for a bad Seattle team. Look at the same numbers that Stankoven put up when he was 21 years old. 14 goals, 38 points, and a -1. He was getting a little bit more ice time, and then this season he took off. I do think Shane Wright's one of those guys that for Logan Stankoven, who wasn't in the greatest situation with Dallas because he wasn't used the way that Carolina is using him, I do think there's a chance that that guy could thrive if you decide to go down that path. The goal is always to be strong down the middle, and if you can go get another guy and Dalibor Dvorsky outplays him, well, now you're great because you've got three guys down the middle that you feel really comfortable with. But those are the guys that you search for. You search for the young ones that feel like they need to be in a better position to succeed, and it's honestly ironic that we're talking about that because that could be the same sentiment for a Jordan Kyrou. Like he might succeed in a better situation. And if you can get a guy who might succeed in a better situation, well, then that's a win-win for a team that nobody's really talking about at the end of the day.
Yeah. And someone said on the text line, why do you not think Dvorsky can get there? I don't know if he's going to be the playmaker that Stankoven is. And maybe I'm wrong. And again, like part of this is where it's so hard to evaluate centers because it comes down to who are their wingers, right? And the same can be said for like Kyrou. You've brought this up in the past. Can Kyrou get back to being a 30-goal scorer here if his like center is Pius Suter or Pavel Buchnevich? Probably not. But when I look at Dvorsky's numbers, like Stankoven, 23 assists this past year, 24 assists the year prior, and then you look at Dvorsky's and it was 9 assists this season. I just don't know if he's going to be the playmaker that can get there. I think the goal scoring is there to be a 15, 20-goal scorer. I don't know if he's going to be an extreme playmaker to help get to that mark to where he's got 20 to 30 assists a season. But that's why I would just continue to say you should go out there and try and get another out to this, right? Because it's that depth up the middle that we're talking about. And someone said you guys are overvaluing Kyrou. I don't think we are, man. I mean, you got a cost control guy. You look at the market, which really helps him in free agency. There's not a goal scorer on the market outside of Alex Tuch. And Alex Tuch's going to get more than Jordan Kyrou's making right now on his current deal.
And he's older. He's going to be 30 years old, 31 years old.
Exactly. So I think teams are going to be on the trade market, and I think a team that's looking for scoring, I mean, you mentioned it in the commercial break, the Blackhawks are looking for a veteran that can score goals. Boy, do I have something to offer you for for your potential first-round pick.
Yeah, they want a guy that's a core piece in his prime that can bring offensive spark to the team. I mean, that's Jordan Kyrou to a T. Whether we feel lower on him doesn't mean what the NHL feels about Jordan Kyrou, and that leads us to what Chris Johnston put out there. Again, we're going to go through this whole thing a little bit later on with our Tinder Thursday today, but Chris Johnston's trade board had Jordan Kyrou at number 3. That means that there's value. Chris Johnston doesn't just put these guys on a list. Chris Johnston is talking to insiders and scouts and front office members around the National Hockey League, and that's a name that keeps popping up. It's why number 1 on this list, if I remember correctly, was Vincent Trocheck. That's a number 1 center that teams would be going after. But Jordan Kyrou's at number 3. He also has Binnington at number 8. Robert Thomas, who seems to just not get off of these boards, at number 15, and Colton Parayko at number 16. How many of these guys do you think are realistically going to be moved this offseason?
I think the most realistic one is Kyrou. And then I think that would be the only one I would bet on today. I think they probably should listen on Parayko. So like that, him being on the trade board makes sense to me. Doesn't really fit into the timeline of the Blues. I just don't know that they're going to move on to him because of what we had in our conversation with Curbs yesterday. Where are they really going to want to go extremely young on the back end and not have enough veteran experience for those guys to help them out? I don't think they're going to do that. I personally would because I think you're retooling / rebuilding again. But I don't think they will. I think it's just Jordan Kyrou. I don't think they're going to trade Thomas, and I don't think they're going to trade Jordan Binnington because I just don't think there's much value, and they value having two goaltenders that they can trust that can get through a 84-game season.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I think Jordan Kyrou's on this list. I think there would be names on this that's not on this list that would be more likely to be traded than Binnington, Thomas, or Parayko.
Suter.
Like, I think Pius Suter. I think there's a chance Cam Fowler's name could come up depending on how they view him and if they think there's somebody else out there. Yeah, I mean, is there another guy out there that they feel like fits more into the core that they could bring in that provides a little bit more veteran leadership and maybe get something for that? Like, I think there's guys on this list that you can trade, the guys that aren't on this list that you could trade over guys that are on this list. And it's just going to be the endless conversation. I saw David Pagnotta mention that the Utah Mammoth are definitely going to revisit the Robert Thomas conversation, as everybody should. But you made a good point in the commercial break. That was when Doug Armstrong was a little bit fiery. I don't think he's going to be that same fiery attitude this offseason to where it's like, yeah, screw it, let's get rid of these guys. I think there's going to be a little bit more level head conversations being taken place. So I think Kyrou is the realistic one. And other than that, I think the rest of these guys are just going to be on the list the rest of the way. But, I mean, if there's going to be a lot of trade activity this offseason, the Blues might be that one-stop shop for teams, and it sounds like there are going to be a lot of active teams on the trade market, which we'll get into that coming up at 12:15 this afternoon. Coming up at 15 minutes, though, we will get back into the Cardinals' offensive struggles in the month of May, and where's your concern level at? You can send us the text messages 314-399-9646, and also J.J. Weatherholt, still in that slump, if you want to call it. Do you consider moving him out of the leadoff spot once Lars Nootbaar returns? So we'll get into that in 15. But coming up next, you send us your questions. We'll answer them next here on 101 ESPN.
Fire and his team will at 100westdental.com.
399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. You can join over in on the YouTube chat. Our graveyard that you can jump into over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. It's 11:50. Your time check brought to you by Clarkson Jewelers, an officially licensed Rolex jeweler. Along with Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. Eric filling in because BK is out today and tomorrow. He'll be back with us on Monday. In the first question that we had, T-Bone, on our Air Comfort Service text line comes from the manager, Lou Brown, and he asks if we're going to give Eric his chance to sing, and believe it or not, today.
You know, that's up to him. You don't want to pressure anybody.
Eric, I don't know you very well yet, buddy. We've only worked a few times together, but I got to be 100% honest. You don't look like you're a singer.
I have a beautiful voice. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, boy. Wow.
Hey, boy.
All right, he just put pressure
Eric
on
just
himself.
committed to it. All right, Eric, we're going to get your karaoke skills coming up in the 1 o'clock hour today, so we'll see what that one sounds like. From the 314, you mentioned Pius Suter. What do you think he could get in a return if the Blues were to trade him? He's the toughest one to judge, to be honest. He's never been traded before. Like, he's always been a free agent signing. I don't know what a guy like that would command. He's 30 years old. He's always a strong defensive player. He's going to give you at least 15 goals, but has the potential to get you to 25. I don't think he gets you something by himself. I think if you wanted to get aggressive and get something back in return that can help you, you package that together with another commodity to see what another team would want. Like, I don't think you're getting a second line center for Pius Suter, but could Pius Suter in the 15th overall pick bring you a guy that you think could play for a second line center role? Like, that's where I think Pius Suter's value would be on the trade market.
I think he has very little value on the market. And I think even if you package him, I think it's very little that helps add to it. And the reason I say that is, look, nobody really wanted him in free agency, right? I mean, the Blues ended up getting him. They got him on a contract that we weren't expecting. I remember us all being extremely excited. And it looked like his one breakout year was 2 years ago, and then he kind of reverted back to what you kind of expect from Pius Suter this past year with the Blues. And I thought they would trade him at the deadline because he had no trade protection. I thought teams would look for a guy that they could bring in as a third-line center and have for 2 playoff runs, and there clearly was no interest around him. And even the Blues don't even view him really as a center, I don't think. They kept moving him off of the center position because he's just so tiny. He doesn't really profile as a playoff center. So I don't think there's a ton of value for him. Like, my first instinct when you asked that question was third-round pick, maybe best case scenario, a second-round pick if you try to trade him.
Yeah, probably. And that's why I think if you want to get crazy, maybe you would package something with it. But I think the Blues probably value Suter more than what another team would, which is why I don't know if he gets traded, but I think he's more likely to get traded than a Robert Thomas or a Jordan Binnington this offseason. From Beavis's Sports Performance, would you guys consider an offer sheet for center Maverick, or as BK likes to call him, Maverick Bork of the Dallas Stars with their cap crunch? I'm not opposed to it. I don't think you need to offer sheet him. I think you could trade for him. I mean, I think it was Pierre LeBrun or Emily Kaplan that had in their piece today that basically said, like, the plan is Dallas to re-sign Jason Roberts into an extension. And if that's the case, they're going to have to move somebody out. So, yeah, if you want to take a shot on Maverick Bork, I mean, he was kind of what Logan Stankoven was this year for Dallas. He had 20 goals and 41 points. He was a +6. Didn't really do much in the postseason, but I don't know if I would be trading for Maverick Bork because I think that's Dalibor Dvorsky. Now, maybe you want depth to it, but I just don't think I would trade, nor would I offer sheet and give up my picks for it.
Yeah, I'm interested. I don't know if I would do it either. Again, I don't, even if you think he is Dalibor Dvorsky, I think it's okay to have 2 outs for that number 2 center spot. I would consider it. I don't know on the offer sheet because that's one of those that has to play out for a while, like we saw with the Edmonton one with Broberg and Holloway. I think you can maybe trade for him. I would have interest just depending on what it looks like in terms of what you have to give up for him either way, in terms of capital when you sign him to the offer sheet or if you just decide to trade for him.
Yeah. From the 618, if Gorman flops by the All-Star break, who do you feel like would be the third baseman going forward?
Nolan Gorman.
Even if he flops, T-Bone?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that they've got an internal answer at third base, at least for this year, right? Going into next year, we'll see what the conversation is. But for the rest of this year, I think it would still remain with Nolan Gorman, that you continue to play him kind of what they've done, right? Every 2 out of 3, he's at third with a DH day in there, and you just see if he can find his power stroke again. Because if he does, now you're talking about a guy that might be able to play into your future, or that you could maybe trade while his value's a little bit high. But I think he's the answer, because I'll ask Kyle Reis about this. Kyle Reis, the Cardinals prospect guru, will be on with us in the 12 o'clock hour at 12:30. I don't know if Blaze Jordan's actually really a third baseman. He can be over there, but is this like the Juan Yepes of, yeah, he can go out in left field, but he's not really a left fielder, you know? So I think the answer is Gorman.
Yeah, I think so as well. Maybe they find a way to get Blaze Jordan more reps up here if things don't go well for Nolan Gorman. I actually think it's more likely you'd see a different third baseman if things went well for Nolan Gorman rather than things flopped. Because if things went well for Nolan Gorman, maybe he becomes a trade commodity and they give an opportunity, rather than if things flop, they're just going to keep playing him through the rest of the season, because it was all about getting answers for a lot of these guys. From the 618, with the Blues ECHL affiliate team being the favorite to win the ECHL championship, is the East Coast Hockey League considered the AA of hockey. Did you know that the Blues, let's start here. Did you know that the Blues had an East Coast Hockey League affiliate?
I
did not. Did you know that they were in the finals right now and up 3-0?
Definitely did not.
Also did not know. It's the Florida Everblades that are up 3-0.
Of course. Close to home.
I would say, now this is with very little information on this or knowledge on this, so I'd have to ask like Jamie to get a little bit more understanding of it. I'm looking at their roster right now, and they don't have a prospect playing for their East Coast Hockey League team. Like, any guys that they have drafted are not playing for the East Coast Hockey League. So I think the East Coast Hockey League is typically the league below. So yes, if you want to call it AA, it's the league below the AHL, to where if all of your guys can't get playing time at the AHL, they go to the ECHL. But typically with Blues prospects, they're not sending them there because they want them at the AHL to practice and get reps. So I don't believe it's the AA to where like you're getting guys reps that you want to see the prospects. I think the AA for guys that the Blues value is college, juniors, playing overseas. Then the AAA would be once you get to the AHL in the major leagues.
Yeah, I don't know what the comp is for the ECHL, because AHL is definitely AAA. I agree.
Maybe spring ball, independent ball, spring ball.
Because like you said, I would consider more of World Juniors, college, the overseas leagues, like where Stenberg's at right now. That's more of what I would call kind of the quote-unquote AA. I mean, maybe ECHL you could convince me is like high A or low A, but that's typically more of a league that's the high school kids, so I don't even think that fits into this. So I guess I would say independent ball, but I honestly don't really know what a fair comp is.
Here's a great example for you to why I think playing overseas or juniors is AA compared to playing in the ECHL. The Blues' third-round draft pick from 3 drafts ago, Andre Kosh, he just signed an extension to stay in Finland and keep playing. And typically with draft picks, the Blues are conversing with those players of what's best for them. If you're not playing at the AHL and you want to keep playing...
They didn't say go to Florida in the ECHL?
They said, let's not send you to the Florida Everblades and let's keep you where you're at out in Finland. Let's get one more of these before we take a break. From the 314, why not move Raynel Rodriguez to third base at AA so that you can find a spot for him on the Major League roster?
I think one, it comes down to, is he a good enough athlete to play in the hot corner? And I don't honestly know the answer to that. It sounds like he's got a pretty good arm, so it sounds like his arm would at least translate there. I think they're not in a spot yet where they want to move him off, because I think they still believe that he can be a very good catcher. Now, what that means for the other 4 catchers ahead of him right now,
won't get playing time over Pies.
I have no idea. I also think they currently, I do wonder if at some point they're going to kind of change his position while he's in AA. But right now, I think they want him to get comfortable at that league. Have you seen what he's doing down there with Springfield?
Yeah.
It's not good.
No, it's not.
He's struggled since he's gone up there, which you would expect. I mean, he's not even 20 years old. For context, according to Baseball Reference, he is 5 years younger than the average player at AA. And so far, he's got a 544 OPS down there. So he's kind of had his struggles. I think this is kind of what they did with Walker, where I think they want the first half of the season, or the first half of his time there at Springfield to be, okay, get accustomed to pitching here. Let's kind of slowly bring you along with your bat. And then once we feel comfortable in the bat and that you're processing things here at AA, if they believe there's another position he can play, then they'll transition him to it. But I don't know if they're going to do that or not.
Yeah, I don't think you worry about that right now. I think you keep him at the position you're comfortable at. The bat's what plays and how you get into the lineup. I know we got to take a break, but how about this one that just popped up to me, T-Bone? David Pagnotta was on Leafs Morning Take. Anaheim was one of the teams that had interest in Colton Parayko, and I believe those discussions are going to be revisited this summer. Are you comfortable if you want Mason McTavish to trade Colton Parayko? Because that's what it would take. Ask yourself the question, would you trade Colton Parayko for Mason McTavish, or would you trade, if you really want a centerman, like that's the kind of sidebar into this. If you really want a centerman, if I gave you two options, Parayko for Mason McTavish or Kyrou for Shane Wright.
Oh, I would probably do Parayko for McTavish because I don't think I'd trust Shane Wright to develop into that number 2 center.
I think I would go Kyrou for Shane Wright.
And I think it's probably an overpay with Parayko, but I mean, if you're going to acquire a guy like that, you probably have to overpay.
Yeah.
Two reasons I would lean that Parayko route. One, I trust McTavish more than I do Wright to potentially develop into that number 2 center. And two, Parayko doesn't fit your timeline.
Yeah. You're not wrong. And I mean, if you trade Parayko for Mason McTavish, you go to the market and you try and find a veteran defenseman. But that just goes to what Curbs talked about yesterday of, man, they realized how much they needed that veteran presence on the defensive end. And man, you're going to take another 1,000 plus games from that back end.
This, by the way, is why I'm not sure that they trade Parayko, because I don't want to say they overvalue him, but they value him enough to keep him around to where they won't be willing to get to the puke point to make a trade like for McTavish, for example, if that's what it takes. If
you want Adam Jiricek on this roster next year, you can't trade Colton Parayko. And we didn't get to this. Maybe we'll get to it tomorrow, but you got to have some veteran if you're going to have 3 guys that have played less than 100 games in the National Hockey League. One of them who hasn't even played in the NHL yet. So
if you're rebuilding, retooling?
I don't think their mind is they're rebuilding. I think in their mind they think they can be competitive next year.
So we're back in this again.
Now we can have different opinions on that, but I think they would look at it and say, if we're keeping Thomas and we're going to keep Jordan Binnington, we think we can at least put ourselves in the conversation for a playoff spot.
Yes, my question is it not more they may say that this would be where Parayko would play long term, but is it not more beneficial to just get those defensemen those reps constantly, even if you had a veteran or not, just, hey, we want Jiricek up here, because the best way to learn is to be playing at the NHL level, like you saw with Logan Mayhew. Have that happen now, and yes, it makes us worse today, but we think it'll make us better for, 2, 3, 4 years down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Tanner Henderickson, Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15 minutes, we're going to get into our Tinder Thursday, looking deeper into that trade board from Chris Johnston, and if we're going to swipe left or swipe right on some of these options. But coming up next, how concerned are you about this Cardinals offensive struggles in the month of May? That and J.J. Weatherholt potentially on the move in the batting order. All of that next year on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. So 3 games against the Milwaukee Brewers and a total of 2 runs scored. All 3 losses as the Cardinals were swept out of Milwaukee. Day off today before they take on the Cubs starting tomorrow night out at Busch Stadium. Along with Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So now that the month of May is coming to a close, you got a few more games in it before it officially wraps up, T-Bone. The numbers aren't pretty offensively for the Cardinals in the month of May. And that was the area that we were praising this team for in April. We didn't think their slug was going to be very good. We didn't think they'd find ways to score runs, and they did so. Albeit it wasn't sexy numbers, but they were still very good. They have not been in the month of May. A .237 batting average as a team, which is tied for 15th in Major League Baseball. .306 on-base percentage, which is 20th. .360 slug, which is 23rd. .666 OPS, 23rd in Major League Baseball, and they've scored 80 runs, which is 27th in Major League Baseball. And you looked at their runners in scoring position, T-Bone. That was also towards the bottom of the Major League Baseball standing. So offensively, it has just completely disappeared for this team in the month of May. And it makes sense when you think of the fact that 1 through 4 has been finding ways to hit, but really it's just Jordan Walker because Burleson struggled against lefties. Weatherholt has lost that power, still getting on base a little bit, but not like he was early on. And Herrera's gone into a little bit of a dry spell. So really it's been Jordan Walker, and 5 through 9 has just been non-existent.
Yeah, bottom of the order has been the thing that's really killed them.
Really killed them. Like the top 4 have pulled them through. It's just it hasn't been as good as it was in the month of May or in the month of April. What's your concern level at right there, T-Bone? Because I think if you look at what they did last year in the month of June, that's where things significantly dropped off. And the numbers that they put up in June offensively are eerily similar to what they just did in the month of May. We all know that it fell apart last year because of the pitching. So where are you at concern-wise with this offense?
I'm not overly concerned. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm maybe sitting at like a 5. Which for some people might be kind of high. But the reason that I say I'm not overly concerned is I think a big driving factor in this slump is J.J. Weatherholt slumping in the month of May, right? I mean, if you look at his numbers in the month of May, the slash line's 205, 314, 284. He's at a 598 OPS, a 75 OPS plus in this month. I don't think he's going to be that bad all the rest of the year. I don't think baseball's completely figuring him out. I think he's going to start to make those adjustments, and I kind of wonder if we're starting to see him a little bit over the last handful of games. And then once he gets going, I think you're looking at the lineup getting back to kind of where it was. And Gorman and Wynn will have their stretches where they play well, and you're going to add a reinforcement in Lars Nootbaar in that potential 5 spot in this order. I think you're ultimately going to be fine. I think you're going to be okay. They're not slugging as much this month, but I think part of the issue for them is they've just run into really good pitching, and especially over the last 9 games where this has really started to stand out for their offense. I mean, look at what they went up against the Brewers, right? Mizorowski, Harrison. You went up against the Pittsburgh Pirates, who've got a pretty good rotation as well, where they ran into Mitch Keller in that start. And the Reds have got okay pitching. Like I think that's just been the pitching that they've run into in this stretch. I would say my worry on a scale of 1 to 10 is 5, because I think your top 4 is still very good with a guy that's going to be coming in about 10, 20% above league average in Lars Nootbaar when he returns.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, it's concerning now. I knew this was going to happen at some point. You knew they were going to go into a little bit of a dry spell. They were going to regress. The concerning part, of course, is the 5 through 9, and you just don't have any other options that can fill into that spot until you get later on in the season when you bring guys up. But I think when you look at J.J. Weatherholt, yeah, he's gone into a little bit of a slump, but he still has found ways to stay competitive. Jordan Walker has still been really good for you, and you're going to get Lars Nootbaar back. And I think when Lars Nootbaar returns, it takes the load off of your top 4 guys a little bit more, because you've got another option that can showcase some pop and has the ability to get on base for you. And it also pushes guys down a little bit more. I'm not relying on Mason Wynn or Jose Fermin to come up in a big spot for me in the 5-hole. Now they're hitting 6 or 7 to where maybe you've already scored a couple of runs. I will say, though, the regression is what you're worried about long-term this season. Like, maybe the month of May isn't concerning you and it still finds a way to kind of keep itself in the middle, but how long does it go for, if that makes sense, to where do you lose a J.J. Weatherholt for a whole nother month? Does Mason Wynn just never get out of this shell? that's when it starts to get a serious concern of, okay, well, you're too top-heavy. You've got 2 or 3 guys, that's it. You've got to find ways to showcase more ability to win because you can't be perfect every single night.
Yeah, I think that's just going to be kind of who they are as an offense this year. And I don't think we really saw that in the first month because at one point I think they had 7 of the 9 guys above league average. Pages was above league average before he went through like a 0 for 25 spell. We knew he wasn't going to be a guy that finished above league average offensively. We knew Mason Wynn was probably not going to be extremely high above league average. Best case, he was probably going to be right around it like he was 2 years ago when he was, I think, 4% above league average, if memory serves right. Looking at their numbers through the month of May, like the individual players, the only thing that's really changed is Weatherholt's just not hitting. Mm-hmm. And Wynn's been much worse. I mean, you look at his WRC plus so far, it's at 57.
Wynn's at the spot to where it's like you kind of wonder if you need to move him out of that spot.
I mean, I just don't know where else you hit him because nobody else is hitting above him, right?
Yeah.
So I think Wynn's going to get better. Will he be like 10% above league average? Probably not, but I don't think he's a guy that's greater than 40% below league average, right? I think he's going to get better. And then once Weatherholt figures it out and you add in Nootbaar, I think you're looking at a lineup that's going to always be top heavy. I think it's always going to be, once you get past that 5 spot when Nootbaar returns, you're always going to want more to be desired. And I saw someone on the YouTube chat say Gorman's just not cutting it. Yeah, they need Gorman to kind of figure it out, right? And so far he hasn't done it. But I don't think that's going to change. I think the conversation of what about the bottom of the order, I think it's going to be a conversation all year long. Because as we talked about yesterday, who's the internal replacements that are coming, right? I don't know where the path is for a Joshua Baez to come in and help this lineup at the bottom. I don't think they're going to make a move to bring up a Blaze Jordan or a Jimmy Crooks because I don't know that there's playing time for those guys.
Or roster spots on the 40-man.
Exactly, yeah, in the case of Blaze Jordan. So I think this is kind of what the lineup's going to be. I don't think it's going to look as volatile as it has looked over the last 9 games, but I do think it's going to be a very top-heavy lineup where you watch the top 4 and you go, boy, I hope those guys score a run because if they don't, we're going to have to wait till we get to their spot the next time through the batting order.
From the 618, why do you guys keep acting as if Lars is going to be the savior for the Cards? His stats are mid at best. OPS plus last year was 96 and coming off of an injury. Somebody also said, like, his numbers in the minors have not been good on his rehab stint.
Well, 1, I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, it's a rehab stint.
1, it's a rehab stint, and 2, he's playing catch-up, right? I mean, the Cardinals have said this is spring training, essentially, for Nootbaar. And typically when you watch spring training, BK tells us it doesn't matter, the stats.
So this doesn't matter.
Exactly. And B, this isn't a typical spring training for a position player where the pitchers are trying to catch up. The pitchers are way ahead of him, and he's trying to catch up right now. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about that.
And why am I looking at him as a savior? I'm not looking at it as a savior, but I am looking at it as you're giving another competitive guy or another competitive bat into a lineup that does get on base, which I think is an important factor for this Cardinals team and does give competitive at-bats. That lengthens the lineup a little bit more so you're not playing Fermin or Wynn or Gorman in the 5-hole. And then somebody also said, do you bat Lars Nootbaar 2 or 5 when he comes back? And I think I presented this yesterday to you, T-Bone. J.J. Weatherholt, he struggled in the leadoff spot. Like, he's got a 205 batting average, a 314 on-base percentage. He's 25 points below league average, an OPS plus of 75. Do you consider moving him down but when Lars Nootbaar comes back and putting Lars in the leadoff spot?
I don't. I hit Nootbaar 5. And the reason that I'm not doing that is, answer this question for me. Who's your future leadoff hitter?
J.J. Weatherholt. I said Lars Nootbaar. J.J. Weatherholt.
Exactly. And that's why I'm not going to pull him out of it. I get it. He's been struggling. This is a year where it's okay to have him kind of struggle and learn through it. Now, if they feel internally that he's putting too much pressure on himself as his struggles start to continue because he feels he has to get on base, then okay, then it's a conversation. But I don't think he's going to do that. I mean, look at the guy. He looks composed. Even in his struggles, I think his at-bats look fine. So I would not. I would keep Weatherholt in the leadoff spot. When Nootbaar comes back, I'm not putting him 2 because I don't want the 3 left-handed lane from 9, 1, and 2, and I'm not moving Herrera out of that spot. I'm not hitting him in the 3 spot because I want the contact hitter and Burleson there, and he's not hitting cleanup in place of Walker. So I think naturally he goes to 5, and then you bump Gorman down into that 7 spot behind Mason Wynn.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And plus, like what people just said about how he's behind in the pitchers and hasn't been that great in rehab, I'm not going to put him all of a sudden in the leadoff spot in the most commanding position that you need right away. I'm going to keep Weatherholt there. Like, I need him to learn the lumps of this role. You have ups and downs, and you got to figure out how to battle through it. You can't just all of a sudden get bad and then move him out.
Also, real quick to the texter's first point of why do you guys act like he's the savior? I agree with you. I'm not acting like he is the savior, but he is an upgrade in this lineup, right?
Yeah.
Because if you put him in, there's a chance you're pulling Victor Scott's bat out of the lineup.
Correct.
Right? So you're pulling a guy that is, 30% below league average for a guy that even last year in his down year was the first year he was below league average. And I think part of that was because he couldn't really move because of his heels. And the hope is that with this surgery, he gets more to the guy that we saw in years past, which was 24, 14, and 13% above league average. That is a huge upgrade to a lineup that, as we talked about yesterday, 5 through 9 is the worst in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from with this. You're taking a bad bat out of the lineup and putting an upgrade in. It's not he's a savior. It's just a more competitive bat that lengthens the lineup for you in this stretch where you need a little bit more help on the offensive side. He's Tanner Henderickson, Eric Harkey with us as well. Coming up at 15, Kyle Reis, Cardinals prospect guru, is going to join us to talk a little bit about Baez, Crooks, Blaze Jordan, and where these guys fit into the Cardinals and if we'll see them at some point. So he'll join us in 15. But coming up next, Chris Johnston put a trade board out, which means on a Thursday, it's time for a little Tinder Thursday here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends out at Classic Air Care. This time of the year, it starts to get hotter and hotter, and if you've got an older unit, you're thinking, oh boy, here we go. So maybe you just need to invest in a new one right now. Maybe you're thinking there's no point in stressing all summer that it's going to conk out, and in the middle of it being 102 degrees outside, we don't have air. For somebody that's got 3 little kids at home, I don't want to deal with that. So that's why if you're looking for a new HVAC system, look, let's be honest, it's expensive. It's not a fun thing to do. But Classic Air Care makes this thing easy for you. They've been around since 1926, making people comfortable with their company, with the knowledge of their technicians, with their incredible customer service. And when it comes to purchasing a new HVAC system, a couple of things. One, you don't need to schedule and hassle with having somebody out and doing the car salesman bid with you. No, you can get an instant quote online. You go to their website, click Instant HVAC Quote, answer 3 simple questions. They'll give you the quote right there in your internet browser, and you set it up and schedule it, and they can come out and take care of that for you. No payment, no interest for 12 months on a new HVAC system. And whether you need a new HVAC system or you're trying to maximize the life of that other one, Classic Air Care has got you covered. So call them today, schedule online. Just do me a favor, tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. Classic Air Care and classicaircare.com. Along with Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario, and on a Thursday when I'm driving into the station today, I open up Twitter, and I see Chris Johnston's trade board, and I said, damn it, it's time for a little Tinder Thursday. Yes. T-Bone is ready. Eric's like, what are you guys getting so excited about? If you're not familiar with Tinder, like yours truly, I'm not familiar with Tinder, it's simple. I'm going to present you a name that was on this trade board, and you tell me if you want to swipe left or swipe right. Swipe left means, T-Bone?
You don't have interest.
Swipe right means, T-Bone?
You have interest.
Okay,
and because we're not paying for premium, you get one super swipe.
You get one. One super swipe. And if you super swipe, Eric's going to hit this note for you. All right. So let's get into it, T-Bone, because Chris Johnston...
I wish I would get a notification like that on Tinder if I ever got super swiped. My phone randomly on air.
T-Bone comes running out of the bathroom. Oh, my God, somebody super swiped me. All right, so this list had 25 people on it. For the sake of time...
You made it 20.
And for the sake of not really even conversing about it, because this guy's either old or too expensive or don't even plan on it, we narrowed it down to 13 different names. So let's start with this first one, T-Bone. We've mentioned him already. He's number 4 on the trade board for Chris Johnston, Mason McTavish, a 23-year-old centerman that plays for the Anaheim Ducks.
I would swipe right. I've got interest in him. I know things didn't go well for him this year. Didn't fit what Quenneville wanted with the Anaheim Ducks. But even in an off year, 17 goals and 41 points in 75 games. I'm willing to bet on the upside for him, and I understand you may have to give up a lot, and we talked about it, maybe even include Parayko in that offering. I'd be willing to try it, man. I would love some offensive upside for that second-line center spot.
Did you know he's Swiss?
And I know.
He is from Switzerland.
I actually had no idea.
He is from Zurich, Switzerland.
So he'll be in blue?
Just like Pius Suter. I would swipe right on this one. I'm not super swiping on this. I like the idea of it. Here's my concern with Mason McTavish. One, he's been moved off the center before for the Anaheim Ducks, which tells me they don't know if he is a centerman, and you don't need another winger on this team. 2, he's a little bit slower, which I don't know if you need slower guys on this team. And 3, Joe Quenneville is an incredible coach, and that guy didn't value this player in the playoffs. That concerns me, especially when you're talking about him making $7+ million for the next 6 years. Now he's 23. Maybe you could get the best out of him. Maybe this is a guy that just needs a change of scenery. So I'd swipe right. I'm just not all that hopped up on him to just get excited and super swipe. Next one up, we've mentioned him before. They've gone back and forth with some trade rumors on this guy. Simon Nemec, the defenseman from the New Jersey Devils. Swipe left or swipe right, T-Bone?
I think I would swipe left. I feel like you don't need a Simon Nemec. Am I wrong on that?
No, dude, I was thinking the same thing. I think the only way I would trade Simon Nemec is if I'm getting creative and I trade
Parayko and then go get him?
Yeah, or I trade a year a check to go get the second overall pick and then trade assets to go get Simon Nemec. I think that's too creative, and I think you're just moving chairs around when you could just say, I've got a Simon Nemec and Adam Jiricek, maybe better than Simon Nemec, because Nemec's concern is defense. And I don't think you want that on your team right now. So I would swipe left. I'm not interested in Simon Nemec, especially the price that you'd have to pay for him.
I'm good to know that I wasn't the lone one, because I know he's going to be a hot commodity, and I felt kind of like I was on my own island by saying left.
I think it's just the name and the young defenseman potential, but like where I stand on this is you might have him in Adam Jiricek. I'd rather let that play itself out than block him. You don't need a right-handed defenseman. You need left-handed defenseman if you're searching for that. All right, number 10 on this list, Elias Pettersson.
Left.
Can I super swipe left on this guy?
That's not a thing. We don't even have a sound effect for it.
11.75. We should have womp, womp, womp. 11.75 mil that Vancouver's not going to eat much on. You're still going to have to pay a hefty price. I get the interest in him because he's Swedish, and you think maybe he comes to St. Louis with a different environment and can perform because St. Louis is basically a suburb of Sweden with all of their Swedish players. I have no interest in that attitude on my team. It would be fun to have Thomas and Pettersson down the middle, not with that type of attitude on the roster.
Yep, I'm 100% with you. I have no interest in him. That's not the kind of reclamation project you're looking for. I think you're looking for the reclamation project of, hey, this guy had a down year, not this guy had a down year. Oh, and he has an attitude problem.
Yeah, no attitude problem, please, on this team. Next up on this list, he is number 11. We've mentioned him already. I think I'm going to have a a hot take on this one. So, T-Bone, I'd like to start this one off with number 11, Shane Wright.
Oh, boy.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the super swipe. I know. This is another controversial piece. Hear me out for a minute. I presented the Mason McTavish, Shane Wright.
This guy definitely looks different when you see him in person. You look nothing like your profile picture, Mr. Shane.
But just hear me out for a minute, damn it. I presented McTavish and Shane Wright to you earlier of the two scenarios, and a lot of people said go after Mason McTavish. Shane Wright put up more points than what Mason McTavish has put up in 4 of his 5 NHL seasons. And he averages a minute and 30 less per game. Shane Wright's better defensively. Shane Wright is a natural centerman and has not been moved off of that spot. I think Shane Wright is the guy that needs the change of scenery and needs a little bit of faith put into him that can play. And I think he fits more into what Jim Montgomery would like to do in terms of the defensive-minded strategy with offense, more so than Mason McTavish, who is not good defensively. So I'm not super swiping this guy to say I'll trade the 11th overall pick for him, but I'm super swiping in the sense of if I'm going to get aggressive for a player this offseason, I think I would take a chance on this guy and maybe not pay as much as I would have to go get a better name recognition centerman on the market. So that is why I would super swipe on Shane Wright.
Yeah, I would not. He's only had one. I would swipe left. He's had 1 year where he's gone for 40-plus points out of the 2 that he's played in. And then last year he reverted back to 27 points, and he was terrible on the faceoff dot, 39% on the dot. I'm not even sure he is actually a center. So I would swipe left. I have no interest in Shane Wright, especially considering what it's going to cost to go get him. So I am going to pass on this one. I'm not interested.
Understandably so. I think a lot of people will fall into that. Somebody just texted in and said, Alex, do you even watch hockey other than the Blues? Yes, I watch a lot of it, and I watched Mason McTavish be bad defensively and get pulled a few times from that game because he was a liability defensively.
Yeah, but he scores.
So does Shane Wright. He did it 14 times 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Mason McTavish has only done that a couple of times. All right, let's get to a couple more of these before we got Kyle Reis on the other side. This one is lofty expectation, so we could go left with it. I think we're all on the same page. Matthew Nyes from the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, he'd cost a lot. I mean, I would swipe right, but I know what the cost is going to be, so
I think I'd
left.
swipe left on the cost.
And I think you're good on wingers, right?
Yeah.
If he was a center, then he'd be a super swipe, but he's not.
What if I said it was all of your first-round picks, Kyrou and Jake Neighbors for Matthew Nyes, and Colton Parayko? So Parayko, Kyrou, Neighbors, all of your first-round picks.
Sure, what the hell?
I don't even think Toronto. I don't think Toronto could do it.
Silly, so yeah. I'm in on it.
I don't think Toronto could do that.
The only guy in that piece of the trade that you said that I would say
is Neighbors.
Yeah, but if I'm getting a guy that's
you're getting a better
plus,
Neighbors. Yeah.
I mean, I'm in.
All right, here's another one that I'll be interested in your take on this because we said no on Simone Nemec. Mason Lohrei from the Boston Bruins. For those that don't know, 25-year-old defenseman who played for Jim Montgomery for a little bit. Second-round pick. He's 6'5", 218 pounds. He's a left-shot defenseman with 7 goals and 26 points this past year for Boston.
I'm assuming you're swiping right.
I'm swiping right on this one.
Can I hear your reasoning? Because I'm on the fence right now.
My reasoning with this is I think you're deficient on the left side.
I agree with that.
And I think this guy fits more into the timeline of your team than a Cam Fowler does. Now, the issue of you still have Cam Fowler on your roster, but and I don't know what Boston would want for this, but like if you could find a way to get this guy, now you're adding another 6'5", 218-pound defenseman who was really good this past year for Boston, and you're putting him on your second line, and Theo Lindstein is more of a third-line defenseman that can be an offensive guy for you, so where now you got more size and more defensive-minded stuff. Plus, Lohrei has a little offensive upside, so I'd swipe right on this one because I think he fits more into the future of your team at 25 years old.
I would swipe right as well because I agree. The left side is where you're deficient. Now, I don't think they're moving on from Fowler. I'm not sure you're going to be able to move him.
I think he's no trade.
If I could acquire him and replace Tucker in the lineup on that left side, I'm okay with that. Now, I don't know exactly what it's going to cost to make this happen. I'm guessing it's still going to be a pretty penny, but I think I'd be willing to do it because it helps for the future and where they're trying to build.
Other one defenseman on this list, Michael Kesselring from the Buffalo Sabres. I'd swipe left on this. Same thing with Simone Nemec. He's a right-shot defenseman that I don't think you need on this team. There's a goaltender on this one that I thought would put on this for an interesting reason. Sebastian Casa, young goaltender for the Detroit Red Wings. That seems like he doesn't really have any opportunities to play there. May want to change the scenery. Any interest in this young goaltender?
I don't think so. I would swipe left. I'm okay with where you're at in your goaltending situation. I know you're going to have to find a replacement for Binnington at some point. I don't think you need to be trading assets to go out and get a guy right now.
I think if you trade Binnington, this would be an intriguing one. I just don't think he's ready to play in the NHL. And you're not going to trade Binnington to bring a young guy in to be a backup and not get any real experience as the backup. So I think that hurts you more than helps you. And then the final one, he is on the roster for the potential Stanley Cup runner-up or champion, depending on what Carolina does. Jesper Kotkaniemi. Swipe left or swipe right? I'm swiping left on this one. If I could hard swipe left on this, I would hard swipe left on this. I have no interest in this guy. He has never really been an offensive producer. He's more of a defensive-minded centerman, and he's a lot of money for a guy that you need offense from on this roster. So I would swipe left. I'd rather just take my chances with Suter and Dvorsky.
Yeah, I'm with you, swipe left. I think he's more of a third-line center, best-case scenario. And I don't think you need that. You're looking for more upside in the second-line center, especially for a guy on term like his. So I'm with you, swipe left.
All right, so we swiped right on McTavish, right, Nyes, but in all reality, too much, Mason Lohrei, and that's it. So this trade book's done.
I kept my super swipe.
Yeah,
for
you
later.
didn't even use it, man. You should
maybe
use it
someone
on
else
Shane
is out
Wright.
there.
You should use it on Shane Wright.
No
A lot of people are saying I'm trolling them. I'm not. I actually think I would take a chance on that one. Tanner Henderickson, Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, Kyle Reis, Cardinals prospect guru and co-host of Wednesdays with Walton and Reis's podcast of the Cardinals Nation, is going to join us next here on 101 ESPN.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Harkey with your Sports Center update brought to you by Universal Windows Direct. The Carolina Hurricanes win Game 4 last night, 4-0 against the Montreal Canadiens. Game 5 will be on tomorrow. You can listen to that on 101 ESPN. Pre-game starts at 6:30 and puck drop is at 7 o'clock. This Sports Center update was brought to you by Universal Windows Direct. You'll be saying, I love my windows.
Podcasts out there when it comes to Cardinals prospects is with Brian Walton and Kyle Reis. Kyle Reis, who's been on the show many of times, Cardinals prospect guru, and you can find that podcast, Walton and Reis, Wednesdays with Walton and Reis podcast over on the Cardinals Nation. Plus, you can follow him on X at KyleR416. Kyle joins us now here on the Collier and Thompson hotline. Kyle, always great to talk with you, man. How are you?
I'm doing really well, guys. Complete honor to talk with you. I can't wait to get into it.
Well, I have to imagine your social media and phone has been blowing up like our text line typically blows up every day of, in all caps, why isn't Baez up with the Cardinals yet? Why isn't Crooks up with the Cardinals yet? So, Kyle, I'll ask you without all caps, why do you think Baez and Crooks has not been called up yet for the Cardinals?
Yeah, between those two and Blaze Jordan, it's a constant storm of questioning the decision-making about roster moves. We'll start with Jimmy Crooks because I think when you look at Crooks, there is a more immediate need there at catcher for the fans' perspective. As just an analyst, you would say the reason Jimmy Crooks isn't here with the St. Louis Cardinals is because, there's a strikeout rate concern that he's really mitigating. He's getting a lot better about cutting down on his strikeout rate. But really what it boils down to is the Cardinals dugout, the Cardinals clubhouse is so reliant on what Pedro Pages does and what Yoel Pozo does. And as long as the Cardinals are winning, they're probably not going to be calling up on Jimmy Crooks. I would suspect that we might see that move somewhere down the line. But really what Jimmy Crooks has been doing is really impressive. He's earning the opportunity to take on the majority workload for the St. Louis Cardinals in very, very soon. It's just, we've seen this in the past with the old front office, and there's a certain amount of patience that this development group likes to practice. And I think that's why Jimmy Crooks isn't here, and also why Josh Baez isn't here. It's been a little different with Baez. Baez he's come along a little bit slower as he adapts to his first role at AAA. So, we're seeing in the last 2 weeks, Joshua Baez get to his power, weight back on the baseball, keep his weight back on it, and hunt some high pitches, especially high hanging breaking pitches. And that's why he has 4 home runs in his last 2 games as we enter play here on Thursday. And, I think it's coming along. I do think if Joshua Baez was a little bit better of a defensive center fielder, I think that we might actually see that happen sooner rather than later. But, he's still kind of clunky in center, and he's a pretty good corner outfielder. So it's just about need and availability.
Do you think, Kyle, that center field will be where he will be playing at the major league level, or do you think it's probably more likely he will be in a corner?
I think long-term he's a corner outfielder. I don't want to rule him out of anything. He's just such a talented athlete, right? When you're 6'5" and 235 pounds and you run like a gazelle, it's impossible to rule out anything. But I think back to when he was 18 years old playing center field, and now he's 22 playing center field, and he hasn't really grown much as a center fielder. So I do think that if he were to make it to the major leagues and they were to say, you're going to be center fielder, I think that would be a post-trade deadline kind of thing, just to give him a little run and see where it goes. Maybe get him used to it for 2027. But I do not think, as he's currently constructed, based solely on how he reacts to the baseball and the routes that he takes, that he's a center fielder of major league caliber, especially for a pitching staff that doesn't strike people out all that often and needs as much defensive help behind them.
The other prospect that you had mentioned that you get all caps about on tweets was Blaze Jordan. I'm curious, what have you seen from Blaze Jordan in his first full year in the Cardinals organization? And then my second question is, how do you think he plays at third base, a spot that many fans would want to see him at here at the major league level?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I still don't feel I watch these games every night, and I still do not have a feel for the defender Blaze Jordan is. I was told by some people in the organization that he's grading out really well at both third and first. He is a limited athlete, and I think even more limited than like Alec Burleson is at first. He has really great hands, and I think that really helps him. And he's got a strong enough arm. But all of that is just to preface saying that I do not think that he would be, again, when you're talking about the Cardinals pitching staff, and that's where it gets really tough, and what you're hoping to gain out of the 2026 season, I don't know if he's that like major league caliber defensive third baseman. I think that if you're trying to give a player runway, then I would feel comfortable with him getting some runway at third. Even if it's a platoon situation with Nolan Gorman somewhere down the lines, spelling Alec Burleson at first a little bit. But really, there's a certain amount of limitation in his athleticism that sort of makes you question what his long-term role would be defensively for a major league organization.
We're talking with Kyle Reis. He is the co-host with Brian Walton of Wednesdays with Walton and Reis podcast over on Cardinals Nation. Kyle, one more on Josh Baez, if you don't mind, because T-Bone and I were having this conversation in the office, just his swing. I mean, he is crushing the baseball right now. There's no question about it. But there's just times where you see the swing and it's like, boy, it just looks wonky. And I wonder how well it translates to the major league level when we get to see Josh Baez.
Yeah, it's fun, right? His mechanics, his swing mechanic is super unique, at least from my vantage point, because the way that he loads, the way that he keeps his body back, and how he explodes out of like his set, it's not like how anybody else does it in the organization. And because of that, sometimes he looks like he's swinging a tree trunk, like an actual tree trunk. It's a whole different like swinging mechanism. And because of that, sometimes his swing looks slow because he's doing a lot of work with his hands out of his stance. And I do think that that's part of why his strikeout rate has been high. Everything has to be working in sync. Everything has to be on time for him to make contact. And a lot of times he's reacting with his hands and exploding through his hands. So what we've seen in the first month and a half of the season is he was just a tick behind. And when he's a tick behind, he's going to strike out 33 to 37% of the time. But we've watched him over the last 2 weeks in particular, I think dating back to about the 14th of May, get his strikeout rate down to about 23%, walk a little bit more, and hit for the power that we're seeing. And it's because his timing is on. And if his timing's on, he's hitting for power. One of the things that's been really positive over the last week is he was dominating left-handed pitching. And, from the start of the season, he's been dominating left-handed pitching, but he's really struggled against righties. And in the last 2 weeks, we've seen him do a better job of identifying breaking pitches specifically. And again, up in the zone with both heat and with breaking pitches and do damage against them. And part of that is the mechanical adjustment that he's made. So if he can continue his mechanical adjustment, then I do think that he is a major league caliber hitter right now with some power. It's just, can he keep it, and for how long can he keep it?
And Kyle, one of the prospects that a lot of people are super excited about is Rainiel Rodriguez. Got promoted to Springfield just a couple weeks ago before he even turns the age of 20. How have you seen him translate from high A to double A so far? And do you think long-term he is a catcher for this organization?
He is settling in defensively as a catcher about as well as you could ask any 19-year-old to settle in to catcher, and especially at a high minor league level like AA. That is not easy. It's a very tough ask. And he is settling in really well. He's played first a little bit just to keep his bat in the lineup and get him some reps over there. He's been perfectly fine at first. But I will say that if he continues on this trajectory, that he does have the potential to be a major league catcher. He's got a strong arm. Sure, sometimes he'll skip the ball to second, or he'll be third base side on the throwdown. That's to be expected for somebody as young as he is, who's trying to show up at AA. But all the other things are there, and it's just a matter of can he get them to that level? Because, one thing that I believe that I talk about a lot is I believe that the catching position in Major League Baseball is the toughest position in all of professional sports. It's just so demanding from a personality standpoint to a physical on the field standpoint to the mental side of it. Like you have to be able to master it all, even as a part-time player, catching 100 games a year. And that's a huge ask for anybody. It's a huge ask for Pedro Pajes. It's a huge ask for Yoel Pozo or Ivan Herrera. Carson Kelly, a former Cardinal legend who is, playing for the Cubs. It's a tough thing to ask him even to catch 60 to 80% of the games. So if he can continue on this track, he does have the potential to be a major league caliber catcher. It's just between now and when he makes his debut, that's a huge ask to get him from the part that he is now to there, even with that potential.
So, Kyle, I know you mentioned Jimmy Crooks off of the top, but, I mean, when it comes to Crooks, when it comes to Rodriguez, and even a Leo Bernal who's on the 40-man roster, like, the Cardinals have a lot of these catchers, and as we're seeing from Cardinals fans, they want to see somebody other than Pedro Pajes. We know the Cardinals value the defensive side, the mind that they bring behind the plate working with these catchers. Are they going to have opportunities for Crooks and Bernal to get chances at the major league level for how much they value a Pedro Pajes?
It's a great question. That's really the question that we're all waiting to see get answered. I think eventually they will, right? I just think right now with the Cardinals having success to start the year, that might have changed how all of this would have gone to start the year. Say that it was reversed. Say that there were, a week ago, they were near 10 games under 500 instead of near 10 games over 500. I think there's a real circumstance where we would have started to see Jimmy Crooks, specifically Crooks, maybe Bernal, make his season debut at the major league level and get a little bit more run. So it's really about circumstance-based. I would not be surprised, and if in a month, say the Cardinals have taken a turn for the worst, if the situation that we're all hoping for is actually in play, which is Jimmy Crooks is at the major league level. He is getting quite a run as an everyday catcher, and they're sorting out the rest as they go along. Again, as I go back to the whole, and I hate to sound preachy here, but I've never appreciated Pedro Pajes. I'm going to come out completely candid, completely clean with the audience. I've never appreciated Pedro Pajes. I've always thought of him at best as a backup catcher, even with his defensive skills, even with what he does in the dugout, in the clubhouse. But I do understand now that I'm a little bit older and I've seen how these things develop, how hard it is to be that level of a catcher at the major league level. And there's no guarantee that even with this immense talent that Leo Bernal and Jimmy Crooks and Rainiel Rodriguez have, that they will ever be able to get to that level defensively. Like we've seen Ivan Herrera get better and better, but he's still not at that level with as much time as he's committed to it. So I will say that I do think these guys will get their opportunity. I do think it'll be in 2026, and I do think it'll be before the trade deadline. But I don't know at what level it'll be successful because of the demands of those positions. And I do think it does the Cardinals well, unless there is a huge, and we'll see how it goes as they get closer to the deadline. But I do think it'll serve the Cardinals well to keep their glut of catchers in place through the majority of the 2026 season, unless they get an offer for someone like Pedro Pajes that they just can't refuse.
Kyle, pivoting to the pitching side down in the minor leagues, the first guy I want to start with is Quinn Matthews. He flew through the system 2 years ago, and then last year kind of ran into some struggles at AAA and has continued with a 5.5 ERA so far through 9 starts and continues to have a walk issue. What have you seen from him this year, and what has been the thing that continues to hold him back as a starter with that command?
It's really interesting, and I was talking about it with somebody a couple of weeks ago, but he's really reliant in his mechanics on rhythm. And when you look back at 2024, his rhythm has really, really changed, and how he throws has really, really changed. He uses his hands differently. His hands work in a different kind of sync with his lower half. And I think it was all just in an effort to, disguise the baseball a little bit, get a better feel for the baseball. But to me, the one thing that I see from a mechanical standpoint is his rhythm is off. And his rhythm is so important to getting velocity and command within his in particular motion. So that's like the one mechanical thing that I see. It's just he's a little off, maybe a little bit more jerky in his mechanics. And I just like to see him smooth it out. It always seems like when he's pitching, they're a little bit smoother. So that's the one thing I've seen. The other thing that's been interesting as I use Quinn Matthews to give kind of an overview on what's going on in the minors as a whole with the pitchers is really, aside from like Yoiker Fajardo, the 19-year-old at high A, most of the Cardinals, top pitching prospects are having walk issues. And I've tried to mine this a little bit. And it's more concerning with Quinn because he had the walk issues last year in 2025. But as I've tried to mine it, my understanding is they're really trying to put an emphasis on hitting the corners, on hitting the black. I guess refining your command as a pitcher in the organization so that when you get to the majors, you are having success. That isn't just, all right, throw it over the middle and let your defense field it, like we saw with Gary LaRocque and his development staff. So I do wonder how much of it is Quinn just trying to come into his own, how much of it is just like residual from last year, and really how he'll continue to progress, because there are times when he is lights out and he is hitting those corners and hitting the black of the strike zone, and it's just not consistent enough. So, I'm anxious tonight. I think tonight is a good litmus test for Quinn. He pitches tonight, and I'm really going to be zoned in on how he's moving from a fluidity standpoint and where he's hitting the strike zone, because he's missing arm side with his changeup and high with his fastball a lot, and it's a really interesting dynamic to watch.
Quick follow-up on Quinn real quick, Kyle. Do you think there's a chance that they may consider moving him to the bullpen if we continue to see these issues potentially this year?
I don't think it's immediate. Again, I'm totally guessing here. I don't have any information on this. I would guess that, I guess there is a chance where he'll make his major league debut pitching out of the bullpen, but the Cardinals need that pitching depth, and his stuff is still good. He has major league caliber stuff, even throwing with the Major League Baseball at AAA. So it really is just a matter of, can he hone in and make it all work? But I would not be surprised if by the time that he makes his major league debut, it's out of the bullpen. But they know they need him as a starter. It's going to be crucial, even with the amount of starting pitcher and prospects that they've brought in to the organization.
Kyle Reis is the Cardinals prospect guru. You can hear him and Brian Walton Wednesdays with Walton and Reis podcast over on Cardinals Nation. Make sure you follow his work on socials at Kyle R416. Kyle, we always appreciate the time, man. Great stuff as always. Enjoy the games tonight. I know we got a great lineup for the minor league pitching side of things, and we'll talk again real soon.
It's a pleasure, guys. Thanks again.
There you go. Kyle Reis, always love getting the chance to chat with him over on the Collier and Thompson hotline. And I think he kind of laid it out for people to where it's like, look, these guys are trending in the right direction. It's just where the Cardinals are at right now. There's just not spots to play them. And that's what the sentiment has just been for us week after week.
Yeah, and I reached out to him because I really wanted to know his thoughts on especially Baez and Jordan defensively, because we know how much the Cardinals value defense. And I 100% agree with what he said, to where if Baez is going to be a guy that probably projects more in the corner, you could play him in center field, but it may not be his strongest. The Cardinals aren't going to want that to a pitch-to-contact staff.
No.
So I think that's why you're kind of seeing where he's kind of in a bit of a logjam. I did find his answer on Jordan interesting, to where he says, according to the Cardinals, he grades out well defensively there at third base. He's not sure on what his long-term position is either, but if he can be like Gorman-esque defensively at third base, I wouldn't mind seeing the platoon. Now, I don't know how you make it work on the 40-man roster. That's a whole other conversation.
You got to DFA somebody. You got to move on from Torres, or you got to move on from somebody.
From Torres?
Well, you got to move on from somebody. Well, you can't make that bad play in left field, man. Like, come on.
Wow.
You see what happened to Harrison Bader.
4 games.
You see what happened to Bader when he missed that no-hitter from Michaelis.
You should calm down.
Bader was gone when he missed that no-hitter from Michaelis.
Relax over there.
We all know what happens.
I thought you were going to say Roycroft, for crying out loud.
Well, you can't DFA Roycroft, but we know how much they value pitchers that you never see at the major league level again. So, but, I mean, in all reality, you have to move on from some type of roster player. So it's Pozo, which I think we all can agree they're not going to do that because they like Pozo. When Ramon Urias comes back, that's another infielder that you've got on your roster. And then you've got Prieto, Fermin, and Torres. And I know Torres isn't an infielder. It's Sajasi. So, like, you've got a ton of guys. You got to move on from somebody before you get to see that player. And I think for Josh Baez, I know people aren't going to like to hear it, or maybe they would like to hear it, depending on how you feel about Lars Nootbaar. Baez's spot is probably not Lars Nootbaar's spot if Lars Nootbaar gets moved. Otherwise, there's not really a corner outfield spot for him right now. Or Lars becomes a center fielder, which I don't think they're going to do with him after he comes back from his injury. With Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll take a break, come back, and hit the junk drawer next year on 101 ESPN.
is presented by Bet365. With Bet365 early payout, you win even if they lose. Get paid out instantly when your team goes up big, even if they blow the lead later. Bet365. Winning is everything.
Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey. I'm Alex Ferrario as we dive into the junk drawer with a little bit of sad news, which is a weird thing to do in the junk drawer, but I feel like it's important to bring up. Claude Lemieux has passed away. NHL alumni is confirming this. He passed away at the age of 60 years old. And I don't know how many people or how much of our listeners know of Claude Lemieux. I would imagine a lot of them for how incredible of a career he had. But what's crazy about this, T-Bone, is he carried the torch for Game 3 in that Montreal Canadiens playoff game. And it's the tradition that they do going into it. Yaroslav Halak did it last night to where a former Canadian carrying the torch to the rink. And Claude Lemieux did that for Game 3. He's a current agent for a lot of players in the National Hockey League. Like post-playing career, he took over as an agent, and he represents guys like Timo Meier, Moritz Seider, Joel Eriksson Ek. He represents a Blues player, Simone Robertson, who plays for him. And Claude Lemieux, 3 Stanley Cups, has the 9th most playoff goals in NHL history, and is most famous, at least for me, from that hit that he laid on Draper in the playoffs, or it was Maltby, it was Draper, if I'm remembering this correct, in the playoffs when it was Detroit versus Colorado. Took him into the board, broke his jaw, turned into a whole big scrum. That's when we saw the next time that they played against each other. It was that all-out brawl on the ice. So devastating news for 60 years old and a guy like Claude Lemieux passing away.
Yeah, and surprising, like you said, just at Game 3 recently. A hell of a hockey player, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, had a hell of a career. So, I mean, shocking news out of the NHL today that he passed away. So, and like you said, he's an agent to a couple of players. So, just unfortunate story out of the NHL this afternoon.
Do you remember? You couldn't have, because by this time he was older. Probably out of the career by the time. No, he was still playing in the NHL. He made a comeback. But do you remember anything about him, T-Bone?
No, I don't remember him as a player.
Yeah,
I knew he was an agent at this point in his career.
Yeah, I was say probably heard stories at that time, but this is, I mean, he missed the playoffs in his career 3 times. He was in the playoffs consecutively from 1985 when he was with the Montreal Canadiens all the way up until 1999 when he missed the playoffs. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He didn't miss the playoffs. He was traded from Colorado to New Jersey, made the playoffs with the Devils, won the Cup, and then the next year he missed the playoffs with the Phoenix Coyotes. He was always traded. When he was traded in his career, you were like, that guy's going to go on to win a Stanley Cup, or that team will do so. So Claude Lemieux passes away at the age of 60. So some devastating news there for a guy who was an agent for a lot of NHL players in the National Hockey League. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to Believe It or Not. But coming up next, we'll get back into the Cardinals and baseball conversation, because the players' side of things presented the start of their proposal. And I think this thing's going to get real ugly real quick. We'll discuss next here on 101 ESPN.
one thing that they're the biggest on right now is the lack of competitive balance in the game. And I think that's going to be the cornerstone issue of the negotiations with the MLBPA. You know, from our perspective, we think if we can improve our competitive balance, we're going to grow the game in a way that will be beneficial to everybody, players, owners, the whole group.
That's MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, who was on the Pat McAfee show yesterday talking about the proposals that are going to be going back and forth now as we approach the potential of a lockout this upcoming offseason. And along with Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. We had the first set of conversations take place yesterday. The MLB Players Association sent over their offer to the owners. And honestly, T-Bone, you and I had the same thought when we read through this by the piece on Evan Drellich. This was an unserious offer. Like, there was one piece of this offer that I was like, okay, at least they're starting the conversations. But just reading through all of this, this is going to get ugly. So let me read through a couple of these bullet points, and then we'll hear from Jeff Passan. And this was in the union's proposal, and you could read the whole article done by Evan Drellich, who, as we like to label him here on BK and Ferrario, the bringer of doom, because that seems to be what he covers. The players' side of things offered a near doubling of the minimum salary to $1.5 million. So essentially, guys that aren't getting paid a whole lot, $1.5 million is the minimum of salary that they would make.
I think NHL, in their latest bargaining agreement, the league minimum will be $1 million.
Probably,
so
because
we're
typically
getting to that range of where the league minimum is going to be mil plus.
Typically, those entry-level deals are close to it, but yeah, the minor leagues or the minimums is like $975,000. So you're right there on it. Players who go through the salary arbitration process, minimum salaries of at least $3 million. Moving the first luxury tax tier to $300 million, so a $56 million jump from where it's at today. So what that means is teams that go over the threshold have to pay a luxury tax. So the Dodgers, when they spend all of the money, they're paying a luxury tax. In this proposal, they're raising the luxury tax $56 million more than where it's at. A pre-arbitration pool that begins at $180 million in 2027, which is up from $50 million. And the union wants to allow some players who are at least 30 years old to become free agents after 5 years rather than the standard 6. And they're also proposing eliminating the qualifying offer. And the biggest thing with all of this is that soft floor that they're wanting people to do, to where the teams have to spend a minimum of $150 million. And I believe that they said in the piece there were 13 teams that are under the $150 million threshold that it would go to, that the players union offered.
Yeah, they're going to call it a competitive tax, to where if you're under the floor, which is what this is, you pay a tax towards it. And this is the part of the whole sheet where I see it and I go, this is an unserious offer.
So they presented them a floor, but they didn't present a salary cap. This, to me, feels like the players are just arguing, well, we don't want to have a salary cap, and we don't really know why, but we'll give you a floor because we know that's what you're going to come back to the table with. Now, let me play this piece of audio here. Eric, this one is Jeff Passan talking about the players want to work with local media rights, because this was the part for me, T-Bone, when I heard Jeff Passan talk about this on the Pat McAfee show, that I thought, okay, well, at least this is the part that they're going to start the conversations with.
The big one, though, and I think where if the MLBPA wants to avoid a salary cap, the way to do it is through revenue sharing. And in the MLBPA's proposal today, it essentially takes local television money, which is not shared very much right now, and shares about 2/3 of it on top of a base of $50 million equal distribution from all teams. And the idea behind that, and not sharing other local revenue, is so that if teams are winning, people are going to go to their ballparks. And the Players Association wants those teams to be rewarded for going out there, for spending money, for putting competitive teams on the field.
So the revenue sharing, and that's what the NHL did when they had their lockout. But you brought this up in the office, and I agree with it. It's hard to imagine seeing a revenue sharing system without seeing some type of salary cap come into place. So overall, yeah, you got the conversation started, but I think when the owners submit their proposal to the players, I think that's where you're going to get okay, this is a joke, because both sides, or at least the players' sides, think you can avoid the salary cap by not playing a salary cap when you have all of these other elements that you kind of need the salary cap.
Yeah, I think what you're looking at with the players is, look, it's a good thing that they made an offer, right? I mean, they need to get going on this, and we'll see. Ownership's counteroffer supposed to be today. We'll see if it gets leaked. I'd be shocked if it doesn't. But it's good that they're at least starting now. And again, there are some elements in the players' proposal that make sense to me, right? Like trying to get rid of the qualifying offer. I see why the players want to get rid of that, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I understand that one. Increasing the pay for guys, increasing the arbitration pool. They also had a thing in there about, hey, if a player's under the age or gets past the age of 30, instead of 6 years of arbitration, it's 5. Like, there are things that make sense from the player's perspective that I'm here for. But the thing is, though, for the players is, okay, I don't think you're going to get this spot, like you said, with this revenue sharing model that they want to present. The NHL's got something similar to it, to where you have to, I think it's grow a percentage of your revenue to earn a revenue share. Otherwise, you don't qualify for it. That makes sense from the perspective of these teams, but you're never going to get the owners to sign off on this idea of this competitive tax that they're selling. That's the biggest one for me that I circled and said, well, there's no way in hell this is ever happening. Because if you're going to bring a competitive tax and you're going to force the 13 teams up to that $150 million floor, or they have to pay a tax, one, I don't know if it's going to be enough incentive to bring them up to that floor, depending on what the tax actually looks like. And two, well, if you're going to do that while also increasing that top floor level, like you had said, up to $300 million, you're actually helping out a team like the Dodgers. You're helping a team out like the Phillies, those teams that are above that threshold, the Yankees, for example, the Blue Jays, for example.
Yeah, Drellick said in his piece that with the ceiling being raised, or the threshold being raised $56 million, that would give the Dodgers $70 million to work with of what they already have on their roster.
Exactly. So you end up helping those teams out up at the top while forcing the teams at the bottom to spend. The teams at the bottom, the reason they want the salary cap isn't so much that they're opposed to having a floor, though I think there are some that are. It is more of, okay, we're willing to bring up our spending if we can limit the spending of the top tier teams and close that payroll gap. This doesn't do that because it doesn't put any significant handcuffs on the teams that are up at the top. It is forcing those teams at the bottom to spend, which is what they need to do. But the other problem is that you're just not going to get the owners to sign off on this because these small market owners like the Pirates, like the Reds, those guys, the Reis, Marlins, so on and so forth, they're not going to want to be forced to spend more money while not putting limitations up at the top group of ownership. So that's the part of this deal that I look at and go, well, this is never going to happen, right? This is where this is just a non-starter for the MLB owners. And that's why you may have some good points in this original proposal that you sent. None of it's going to matter because they're not going to get past that point of this competitive tax that you're trying to offer up.
Yeah, Salty Bald Dad from Caseyville says the floor is more important for competition. I disagree. Yeah, it makes teams more competitive because they're spending money to bring in players, but that doesn't mean they have to bring in good players. They could just go sign aged players to bigger contracts to say that they're at the floor. What makes it more competitive is where you're capping teams off from not doing what the Dodgers do. Imagine what they have right now and then saying we can add $70 million to our payroll. And see, that's where the real problem with all of this is. It's what Ken Rosenthal put in his piece, and we said yesterday. The problem isn't what happens in the regular season. Like, you're raising the floor so that teams are more competitive in the regular season. That's fine. But the regular season doesn't have problems. Cat Dad Gamer says, is there really that much money in baseball? I think Drellick said they're bringing in about $12 billion with what they're putting out there. So there's a lot of money in baseball. Regular season is fine. And you know what? People watch the playoffs. But the competitiveness problem and why you want a ceiling is so that when you get to the postseason, you don't have the Dodgers that just have a ridiculous amount of assets to use, whereas everybody's on the same playing field, like what the NHL just put into place. You can't be over the cap once you get into the playoffs. You got to be at a salary cap in the playoffs, which means you can't bring in guys at the trade deadline and then maximize your opportunity. That's where they're trying to fix this thing, and that's where I think the problem always is going to lie. But somebody else made a great point on the text line, T-Bone, that the problem here is always going to be, for a salary cap, the owners are going to have to open up their books, and I don't know if they're going to be willing to accept that.
Yeah, well, then you get to the whole conversation of what is actually baseball revenue, right? And I think that's where you really get to the conversation because I'm sure the owners will argue, well, baseball revenue is what happens in the baseball stadium and what is related to like the TV rights deals. Mm-hmm. And then the players would say, well, there is no ballpark village gets built right next to Busch Stadium if there's not a stadium there, right? And that's what you're seeing a lot of the teams do. The Braves have this down in Atlanta where they've got their version of it. It's what the Rays are trying to do in their new stadium build that they're trying to get done in St. Petersburg. I think the salary cap is the thing where I don't know where this ends up going, because I don't know if they're really going to be willing to miss games to do this, right? I don't think the owners are stupid enough to try that, because look at where baseball's at. It's clearly in a very good spot. Now, yes, there are competitive balance issues. I agree with you there. But viewership's at an all-time high. Their attendance keeps growing. Do you really want to lose that momentum because you want to argue for a salary cap when it's clearly not affecting fans from going to baseball games? I don't know if you're willing to do that. And you're going to have the infighting from the owner's side of the small market team saying, hey, I'm not coming up to a floor if there's not going to be that cap on the ceiling, because you're just not going to get those. That doesn't help them, because the big problem for baseball, whether you want to call it competitive balance or it's the disparity between the salaries from the teams, where you've got the Dodgers who are spending like $400 million and the Marlins who are spending $73, that's where they're trying to close that gap. Mm-hmm. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if it's a hard floor and it's a hard ceiling. I don't see a way that you're able to do that by keeping the current financials in the game the way that they are currently constructed.
So last night, the Dodgers lost to Teoscar Hernandez. They've been dealing with injuries all season, but yet still finding ways to win baseball games, which is exactly what we think about with this Dodgers team. But I was wondering, after I saw this proposal, if the Dodgers don't win the World Series, or let's say they get bounced in the first round of the playoffs this year, does that does that make things more difficult for the owners to negotiate for with the salary cap, right? Because if that happens, Ken Rosenthal is going to be screaming from the mountaintops, this is the idea of a salary cap is a joke. The Dodgers don't win every single year. They're going to be fine. My retort to that's going to be, yeah, but you know what's going to happen if the Dodgers don't win this year? They're just going to go out and spend more money so that they make themselves better for next year. That's what you're trying to limit these teams from. You don't want the Dodgers to go into next offseason and say, yeah, we got bounced in the first round. We're going to go sign Tarek Skubal. Like, the more money they have, the more opportunities they have to go spend. So, yeah, sure, they don't win this World Series. And let's say the Brewers finally get it done. You can sit there and say, well, see, it doesn't happen every single year. But without a salary cap, the Dodgers are going to continue to keep adding to make sure that their team is unbeatable the next season.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that can happen that can really pull down the owner's argument. I mean, unless it ends up being like Brewers Guardians, then maybe you've got a chance.
Ratings on that one.
Yeah, that would not be good for baseball, because you're right, the ratings would be terrible. Like, maybe the players would try and argue that. I don't think that one would even work as well, because, like you said, there's a chance then the Dodgers go out to free agency and they can go out and afford a Tarek Skubal while the Tigers can't. So the only way that they would not have this argument is if we were to see like Brewers, then the Guardians, then like the Royals, like teams like this go on a run of winning World Series. But you're not going to be able to see that because we've got to get this negotiation done before we get to next season. So I don't think there's any argument in favor from the Players Association of, hey, competitive balance is good. No, we don't need to worry about the payroll disparity. I think that's going to be there no matter what happens this season.
So we'll have to wait to see what the opposite side in their proposal looks like. Somebody also mentioned on the Air Comfort Service text line, guys, it's the first offer. I get it. But an unserious first offer is where things start to get bad blood really quickly, because when the owners send theirs and the players see it, oh, God.
I can't wait to see the owners one today, because it's going to have a cap in it, I think, and I can't wait to see what the number is.
You know what happens after that? Then you get the pissed off attitude that nobody speaks to each other for at least a month, and that's how this thing delays.
We'll be off until September in conversations.
Delays and delays and delays. With Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, it's time to sing for Believe It or Not here on 101 ESPN. All right, T-Bone. I think Eric's in.
He's in, baby.
We convinced him or guilted him.
We'll find out if he comes back after this.
Probably not.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never...
So free.
Flying away on a wing in a prayer.
Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
Did I mess up the lyrics or did you mess up the lyrics?
I somehow did.
You missed that. I looked over and I'm like, what are you doing,
I don't know
man?
what happened to me right there for a moment.
You got excited for Eric.
I did a little bit, yeah.
Eric got into it.
In the whole commercial break, we were trying to remember what his part actually is, and it kind of threw me off on what my part is.
We have sang this song almost every Thursday for almost over a year.
I'm just going to say, I hate having headphones on in your spot and in this spot.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm underwater listening to crap.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. But Eric was phenomenal, so Eric is in on this one. T-Bone screwed up the song. If you don't know what the hell we're doing, you send us a scenario to our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646, or you can send it over on our YouTube chat at 101 ESPN STL. We will tell you if we believe it or not in the scenario that you send our way. Let's start here. I'll kick us off. Believe it or not, the Blues don't have a good enough package to trade for the second overall pick. So I bring this one up.
Do or don't?
Don't. They do not have a good enough package. James Nichols, who covers the New Jersey Devils for NJD Hockey Now, just put a piece out talking about what he believes would be a package that the Devils could put together to trade for that pick from San Jose. And in his piece, he says Simone Nemec, Dawson Mercer, and the 12th overall pick. And he says, I wonder if that would be enough. So believe it or not, the Blues don't have a good enough pick to trade for the second overall one. Blues don't have enough package to trade for the second overall pick.
That's what you're saying. I'm going to say believe it. They don't have a good enough package. And honestly, I think that's just because San Jose's asking for the moon, because I think they actually want to pick number 2, right? I think if you're a GM, you never tell anybody you're not listening. It's the same as why, like, Toronto's quote-unquote listening on the number 1 overall pick. Let me tell you, they're not listening. Unless you give them the Godfather offer, they're not making a move, and I feel that way about the Sharks, and I've stayed steadfast on that. So I'm going to believe it. I don't think there's a good enough package the Blues can put together to move up to 2.
I'm not going to believe this one. I think they could do it. Like, I was going through this with you. I think Kyrou and Mercer, Kairou's got the edge. He's got more scoring ability than Mercer, and San Jose doesn't really need centers. 12th overall pick, I mean, you've got a better draft pick in that with 11, and then you have to put 15 and 29 in, and is 15 and 29 better than what Simone Nemec is? Nemec was the 3rd overall pick. Nemec is also a defensive liability, and they want help on the defensive side. So you'd have to put in another defenseman. Do they want Parayko? I don't think so. Do you want to trade Jiricek? I don't believe so. So I think you got a good enough package. It's just a matter of, does San Jose want to actually make a deal? And that's the part that we just don't know. T-Bone?
Guys, believe it or not, we will see one of Jimmy Crooks, Blaze Jordan, or Joshua Baez before the end of June.
Barring in, like, substitute injury from this?
Injuries.
Are you going to do
injuries?
Well, I mean, like, yeah, there's probably going to be an injury.
I assume there's always going to be an injury, but
if there's an injury
I never
to
plan
Pies,
on that.
Jimmy Crooks will be up here.
Yeah, but I never plan on that in these situations.
So no injuries. I'm just trying to find the loophole, man. We've already talked about the loophole. You know what? I'm going to say not believe it. I don't think they make the call to any of those guys before the end of June. They'll have Lars Nootbaar back. Ramon Urias, you would imagine, will be back at some point. And at that time, you're going to start kind of chopping off some of these guys that are underperforming. Like Victor Scott may be gone. They send Cesar Pareto down. Thomas Ajacci goes down. I don't think they're going to bring Baez up. And Jimmy Crooks is not getting a call up unless something happens to Pajes or Herrera. So I'd say not believe it.
I'm with you. I would say not believe it. If they haven't called up Blaze by now, when they had a 40-man spot open, I don't see them doing it, because once Nootbaar gets activated, he gets back onto the 40-man roster. And like you said, Urias will be back hopefully soon. And if that's the case, okay, so now we rule out Blaze. Baez doesn't sound like he's ready to be a everyday center fielder, so you got to put him in a corner. Well, you can rule that out. And then it comes down to Paez, and I don't think they're going to make the call on Paez because I think they really value his defense/game calling. So I'm with you. I would say not believe it. I don't think we're seeing any of those guys before the end of June.
Well, let's get to the Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Also the YouTube chat at 101 ESPN STL. From the 314, believe it or not, on paper, the Blues are a better team going into 2026-2027 season than what they were this last year.
On paper, will they be better? Ooh, that's fun.
I'd say believe it because you have to imagine all of these players improved. Mayu got better. Dvorsky got better. Lindstein and Stenberg improved. And you're adding a Jiricek and Carbonneau who are potentially going to be better. The real question is Kyrou and Pavel Buchnevich going to be improved? So, yeah, I would say on paper, if they came back with the same roster, they should be better than last year. I don't know if they will be.
Yeah, I would say not believe it because I think if you're going with all those younger guys, I'm not just expecting them to magically take a step forward, right? I mean, I think there's a chance that Mayu could be more of first half Mayu than he was second half Mayu. And if it's not him, then maybe it's Jiricek is that guy. And I thought that team going into last year was pretty good on paper. I know where they finished, but I lean not believe it, though I can see how you get to the spot where you would. It just depends on how high you are on all the kids. I'm a little bit more reserved in my judgment there. So that's why I would lean towards not believe it. But I can see why you're on the side of believe it.
Yeah. Believe it or not, from Salty Bald Dad from Caseyville, Baez and Rodriguez are on the next Cardinals championship team.
Baez and Rodriguez next championship team. Sure, what the hell? Believe it. Why not?
Yeah,
We're going to be champs in 5 years.
5 years, huh?
Isn't that kind of how rebuilds are supposed to go?
Is there a salary cap?
Oh, if there is, it changes everything.
Yeah, if there's a salary cap, 3. If there's not, then no, you won't be a champion ever because the Dodgers will just keep spending money.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Like Baez's bat, you hope plays in the middle of the order for you, and Rodriguez's bat, you hope plays in the middle of the order. So
that's their hope.
You're adding more slug to a lineup that needs more slug, and you've got pitchers that you continue to hope develop. So yeah, you might as well call for it and say that they're a part of the championship. If they're not the answer, then the rebuild takes longer because those are the guys that you're waiting on to help you get to that point.
Really? I actually don't know that it matters on them. I think it's more on the pitching side is what can delay you.
I think it's on the pitching side, but as we're seeing right now, if you don't have the slug, you can't rely on 2 or 3 guys, and I think the pitching would be very helpful. I still think you need a couple of complementary pieces that can get you through.
See, I feel better about where the offense is going because you've got maybe not significant slug, but Walker, Burley, Herrera, Weatherholt. I think we all agree those 4 guys are pretty good. Bottom part of the order guys, like complementary pieces, you can go find those guys anywhere, right? They're not too expensive. That's a guy the Cardinals could go into the market and find if they needed to. To me, it's more on what's their pitching going to look like by then. Because if Baez and Rodriguez flame out, I think they've already got the internal star, at least one of them in Walker. So you've at least got that covered. If like your top pitching prospects like Senja and Doyle, for example, flame out, now we're talking about a serious problem with both your depth and your upside with what your rotation could look like in this build moving forward.
From WJ Jetherholt, believe it or not, Jordan Walker wins NL MVP, Weatherholt wins Rookie of the Year. So both happen.
I'm going to say
Walker's not winning the MVP.
Yeah, that's the number one for me.
You need Shohei Ohtani's arm to fall off for Walker to win an MVP.
Yeah, and maybe both arms.
Probably.
I would say I'm with you. Weatherholt, I think, can win Rookie of the Year.
Agreed.
I'm 100% in on that one. Walker, he just can't win MVP because there's Shohei Ohtani. I mean, that guy threw 5 or 6 no-hit innings yet last night. His ERA is .68. And I had on top of that, he hit a home run to lead off the game. Yeah. So he's just unbelievable. There's no way to win the MVP. If you were to say top 5 in MVP voting, I could get there. I don't know if it'll be 3. Yeah, I'm a little skeptical on 3 because I know the team could hurt him.
Yeah.
Because we know that kind of plays into some of the MVP conversation. But I think top 5 for sure. He could be in that conversation this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, as long as Shohei Ohtani is in the National League, it's going to be very difficult to win MVPs. It's kind of like what life was like when Albert Pujols was there. There was a couple of times.
Even worse, I would say.
Yeah, probably, because this guy pitches, but there's times that you feel like you've got the MVP, but it doesn't matter when you've got a unicorn that's doing something nobody else can do. So until the next Shohei Ohtani shows up, that's just going to be the guy that's going to be in that spot. Let's do a couple more of these on the Air Comfort Service text line. Believe it or not, the next St. Louis sports team to win a championship will be the Battlehawks. No, I'm just going to say not believe it.
I guess they've got a better chance because there's fewer teams. Although I'm not counting that as like a major championship.
How much longer are the UFL around, too, I guess would be the question you ask.
Good follow-up question. I would say not. I would bet on Blues or Cardinals being the next one to win a championship.
Yeah, and if I were to bet on it, I'd say Blues, just because if you get goaltending, anything can happen. Cardinals, you have to wait for your pitching. Yeah. But even the Blues, you're still a few pieces away. Like from that Dom piece, you've got pieces. Are they consistent enough? And do you have goaltending that can steal you some series? That's the real question. Final one, believe it or not, the Blues end up taking a low package offer for Jordan Kyrou just to move him.
I'm going to say not. I've been adamant that I'm willing to take less just because I think they need change for change's sake. I think they're going to get the value they want for Kyrou. I know people will push back on this vehemently on the text line, but I think they're going to get the offer because who's the free agent that you're going to go out there if you need goal scoring? It's basically Alex Tuck, and if you don't end up with him, good luck. I mean, there's nobody else out on the market, and I think the Blues are open to trading Kyrou. So I think they're going to be able to make a move, and they're not going to have to settle for a low ball offer for him.
Yeah, I think the return, if he gets moved, people are going to look at it and be like, that's what you got for him? But it's not going to be about what the guy's name is. It's going to be about what he does for the team in a year or in 2 years. And that is just going to have to wait to find out what it looks like, plus what Kyrou looks like for the other team. So I don't think it's going to be this superstar that comes back in return. I do think it's going to be a name that people maybe aren't familiar with, but it's going to be something that the Blues see the potential in, and that's when you have to let it kind of simmer itself out before you look at it and say, oh, it was a failure no matter what, just like what Bolduc and Mailloux was. People were ready to call it a failure immediately, and at the end of the season, people were looking at it as, it was a great trade by Doug Armstrong to get Logan Mailloux versus what Zach Bolduc has become. By the way, took a brutal penalty last night in that game. Bolduc. Yeah. It was 2-0. He took a hook in the offensive zone, and Marty St. Louis was pissed. I'll be very curious if Bolduc's in the lineup for the next game. Tanner Henderickson, Eric Harkey with a beautiful singing voice with us here as he's filling in for BK. Coming up next, the Cardinals pitching pipeline is starting to show some real promise. Where does that put this thing for the Cardinals? And who do you feel the Cardinals need to clear a spot for by the trade deadline? That's next here on 101 ESPN.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Harkey with your Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The St. Louis Cardinals drop a heartbreaking game against the Milwaukee Brewers yesterday, 2-1. They will be back in action tomorrow night for a 3-game series against the Cubs. That game starts at 6:15. This Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, a Daikin heating and air conditioning dealer.
So if you missed it earlier today, we had the conversation with Kyle Reis, prospect guru for the Cardinals, who hosts a podcast with Brian Walton, talking about Baez and Crooks and Rodriguez. And T-Bone asked him about Quinn Matthews and had a great answer just about Quinn Matthews' continued development. But there's more pitchers that continue to pop up for the Cardinals farm system, whether it's Senja, who has been performing, and that's the guy that the Cardinals acquired from the Seattle Mariners in the Brendan Donovan trade, or everyone's favorite Keith Law, who has his updated prospect rankings that came out earlier today. With Tanner Henderickson and Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. So today, he dropped, Keith Law, a piece on The Athletic of updated prospects in team systems. And Rodriguez was still in there for the Cardinals. He stayed at number 25. Liam Doyle, who was number 26 in Keith Law's prospect rankings, moved all the way up to number 20. And that's the former Cardinals top 10 pick. And then Tanner Franklin, who was not ranked prior for Keith Law, moved up to number 25 in his top 50 rankings. And then, of course, you have the other guys, Quinn Matthews we've brought up, a couple of others that continue to perform in the minor league system. This kind of falls in line, T-Bone, with where we've heard this season things are at for the pipeline. Like, the pitchers continue to develop for the Cardinals. You already got a chance to see Hunter Dobbins. Richard Fitz impressed in spring training before he had his injury. Last season, before he went down with injury, TK Roby was very impressive in continued development. It really does feel like this pipeline that Chaim Bloom has invested his time in is starting to show the promise that gets you excited about what this rebuild looks like.
Yeah, I mean, their pitching pipeline was very exciting when it came into the year, and it's why I would talk about, even at the AAA level, where I would say, they've got better pitching depth. Maybe it's not already yet, but it's at least interesting. And Franklin was a pick that I really liked when they made it last year in the draft out of Tennessee in the second round. They took Doyle in the first round out of Tennessee, then they went with Franklin. And he was a reliever that wanted to start, and they've converted him to a starter. And as you mentioned, with Keith Law, I mean, he's just shot up through the prospect rankings, and he's dominating right now at the high A-ball level with Peoria. He's interesting, and that's the kind of one that you need to get hit on if you're the Cardinals, right? You find a guy, I don't know if I'd call him a lottery ticket because he was a second-round pick, but a guy that was a reliever that you can convert to a starter, and Keith Law had in his write-ups for both Liam Doyle and for Tanner Franklin, he sees number 2 starter potential in these guys.
Wow. And
that's the thing that we talked about yesterday, that what the Brewers have done so well is you blink and there comes another guy that's like a number 2 coming out of their system, right? It's Kyle Harrison that they are able to find and acquire in a trade, and he's a number 2. And Mizorowski, who they were able to develop, he was a true lottery ticket prospect that they drafted in the later rounds, but they're able to make him into a number 1. It's the thing that the Cardinals have been missing, and this is a positive sign that you're starting to see them really develop these guys. And Bryson Motts is someone that we know the organization is high on. You mentioned Senja, who's an interesting guy that they've got at AA. Don't forget they were high on Takoa Roby, who had Tommy John, I think it was Tommy John surgery last year.
Brandon Clark was the one that they got from the Red Sox deal, too.
He'll be coming back eventually at some point. Roby will be this season. So their pipeline, I'm always hesitant to say this because of how quickly pitchers can break. Their pitching pipeline, though, is starting to at least feel more interesting and feel like it's in a pretty good spot to where in a couple of years that hopefully you'll be able to exit this rebuild, and it's going to be a lot of homegrown talent with some swing and miss stuff that's come through the pipeline.
Which is what they're lacking. I mean, it's just the swing and miss stuff. Now, again, I know they're seeing it from Liberatore in May, and even a Michael McGreevy, and even some Leahy has provided it, but it's just not to the same level. And, to the question we were talking about with Joshua Baez of why he's not really a center fielder, because they're a pitch-to-contact team. That's where they're at with these pitchers. But once you get that swing and miss stuff into your lineup a little bit more, you start to feel much more confident of where you're going. And, with the rebuild and where things are at, once you get that pitching to where it's on the cusp of major league level, that's when you really start to kind of put the engine in motion and say, like, okay, now we're ready to start moving here. And that's where I think the frustration comes from for fans, to where they're not getting to see Baez right now, or Crooks right now, or Blaze Jordan, or Reynal Rodriguez. Cardinals just don't see the point in it right now, because let's let everything else marinate. Let's not rush these guys because the pitching's not there where we need it to be to put these guys in a position that maybe succeeding isn't ready to go.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the pitching side of things, or on those position players, for example, I don't think it matters so much on the pitchers haven't developed in their system. It's just they don't have spots for them right now, right? Mm-hmm. Like we talked about it. Where are you putting Joshua Baez? Where are you going to put I know people would want to replace Jimmy Crooks with Pages, but they don't want to do that. And same with Blaze Jordan. Where's Blaze Jordan going, and who's he replacing on the 40-man roster? But with the pitching side of things, that's the thing that is going to get them out of this rebuild, is if this pipeline can start to produce some arms. And it's a good thing that you're starting to see some upside down at like the AA and high A levels, because their biggest prospects have stalled out at AAA from recent years. Think about it. Tink Hintz hasn't developed into the starter that they thought. They converted him to a bullpen arm, and even now it's looking like he doesn't really have much of a future as a pitcher. You look at Quinn Matthews. I asked Kyle if he thinks he may have to convert to a bullpen arm at some point, because it's the second straight year he's had to deal with a walk issue down at the Memphis level with the Major League ball. Yeah, they've got Motts down there, and they've got Dobbins, who's developed, and Dobbins and Motts they clearly think are ready to go, since they had Motts up here recently. But they need those extremely high upside arms like Doyle, Senja, Tanner Franklin to really hit and develop, because if you continue to develop 3s and 4s, that's great. But is the Cardinals organization one that's going to go out there and pay for a number 1 or a number 2 starter? I'm skeptical. They never really showed an appetite to do it when they were spending money. Why would that suddenly change? That, to me, is more of where they've got to hit in their development process to get out of this rebuild. They've got to develop that number 1 or number 2 guy, because I don't think they're spending money on that. We've seen that they're willing to spend on a 3 or 4. Look at how much they gave Dustin May to come in and basically be a number 3. They've got to hit on those high-end rotation arms to get out of this rebuild, in my opinion.
So we're a little over 2 months away from the trade deadline, so still a lot of time for these conversations to take place. But because everybody seems to keep talking about it, who do you feel like the Cardinals need to clear a spot for when that trade deadline, or by the time that the trade deadline hits in their minor league system?
I don't think anybody's going to like this answer. Nobody. I think when you're looking at this, if Baez doesn't appear in a major league game this year, I don't think that's the end of the world. If Jimmy Crooks doesn't appear in a major league game this year, I'm not sure that that's the end of the world. Same with Blaze Jordan. And the reason I say that is it's not a need. You listen on Lars Nootbaar if he comes back and plays well. But if he doesn't play well, I don't think you sell low on Lars Nootbaar. Or if you're not getting the offers you want for him, you're not selling low on him just to create a spot for Baez. I can take care of that stuff when we get to the offseason, not when there is a deadline approaching and things are happening fast. So I don't think there's a quote-unquote need to trade anybody to free up a roster spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that if you were looking at it, though, and you were thinking like beyond this year, Lars Nootbaar would be the prime candidate. To where it's, look, next year we believe Baez is going to be an outfielder for us, and we need to have him in a corner spot because he's not a center fielder. And if you still have Lars Nootbaar, then what are you going to do with all of these pieces? Now, that goes into the need to trade them at the deadline versus the offseason. And if Nootbaar doesn't come back and hitting on all cylinders, well, then you just let it play itself out until you get to the offseason, to where he has a little bit more time to showcase his ability and his health. So I'm with you there. Like, it's not something you have to do, because if you got to wait till the offseason to make moves, but before next season, I think Baez is the one you have to make a spot for on the roster, because you've got a lot of outfielders in the corner that where Baez is going to be most comfortable.
And I think the catching spot as well will be one that, whether it's Pages, Crooks, or Bernal, whoever you choose of that group, you're going to have to clean up a bit of that log jam.
I think the guys in the minor leagues are going to be the ones that get cleaned up. I think Crooks or Bernal are probably gone for how much they value Pages.
I think you might be right on that one, because I'm with you. I think the way they value Pages, I could totally see where they move on from Crooks, and maybe not both of them. They may keep one of them because you want 3 catchers on your 40-man. But I could definitely see that. And that's not a move that's like a sell move. That is we made this move and capitalize on an asset. If you traded Jimmy Crooks or a Leo Bernal, or if they did do the one we're not expecting, Pedro Pages, that's more of a buying move, trying to make an upgrade to the team somewhere, whether that's center field, starting pitcher, or a bullpen arm.
Yep. Tanner Henderickson, Eric Harkey, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll come back and hit the rewind next here on 101 ESPN. Well, we got an update. We got a counter proposal from the owners right before we close the show. I love it.
Tell me we've reached a CBA.
Bobby Boogie, ladies and gentlemen. Bob Nightingale of USA Today tweeting this out 3 minutes ago. The MLB salary cap proposal is at $245.3 million and a salary floor of $171.2 million. So that's $21 million more than what the players' proposal was in terms of the floor, and the ceiling of the salary cap is $245 million, which Bob says the Dodgers, Mets, Yankees, Blue Jays, Phillies, Red Sox, Padres, and Atlanta Braves would all have to reduce their payroll by a combined $578 million to get underneath that ceiling.
So how many teams was that?
It was 8 teams that would have to go underneath the 245.3 cap.
Take Ohtani off there.
I was going to say, God, can we just do an expansion draft in Major League Baseball and start it from scratch? Everybody goes somewhere else.
Like you can on MLB.
Yeah, like you just start it from scratch.
The cap.
Every's roster is gone. Let's start this thing over once again. So that, again, is from Bob Nightingale.
What was the number, by the way, on the low? 175?
$171.2 million.
I'll be curious. I'll have to look at this when I can have some time to do this quickly. But I know that you and I did this early, not in the in the offseason, excuse me, where there was reports of kind of a number that they were ballparking. And when I did the math, it basically came to, okay, so when you pull down, in this example, the 8 teams that are above the cap, and if you push up however many teams it is above the cap, it basically equaled out to a wash. The same amount of money was being spent, but it was able to force some teams to spend while also bringing some down.
Jesse Rogers puts in there that 12 teams would have to increase their spending while 8 teams would have to shed the payroll. He also said the league proposed 50-50 split of revenue with players, as well as revenue from local media centralized and then shared equally. As revenues go up, so too does the cap. So very similar to what the NHL is. Now, I don't know if the NHL's 50-50 split, but as the cap rises, the share rises for the players and the owners equally. So I'll be curious to see what the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of this thing is. But, man, I like this one already more in terms of just the competitiveness of what the players offered yesterday with their proposal. And, again, that's from Bob Nightingale. So I'm sure the fast lane.
10 minutes we'll have the MLBPAs. Well, we're glad that they're willing to start negotiations, but we are against a salary cap.
This was a trash offer from the owner side, and welcome to the ugly conversations that will take place. If you missed anything from our show today, including conversation with Kyle Reis and the players' proposal that they offered, you can check it out on the podcast page after the show today. 101ESPN.com is where you can go. The podcast's always sponsored by Schaefer Door Company. You can also check it out on the easy-to-use and free 101 ESPN app, which is brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Big shout out to Eric, who did a phenomenal job singing and producing for us today. Tanner Henderickson as well. I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll be back with you tomorrow from 11 to 2. The Fast Lane coming up next from 2 to 6 here on 101 ESPN.